You and I are going to step back into the very dawn of our existence. This isn't just ancient history. It is my story, drawn from the oldest sacred texts, holding the raw mystery of our shared origin without any easy answers. Brace yourself to experience our beginning exactly as I lived it. Sacred, raw, and completely unlike anything you have ever been told before. This is our Genesis. Before time even existed, I felt Elohim call the beginning into being. The heavens stretched wide over a formless world, the deep waters buried in total darkness. His spirit trembled over endless black waters, a heavy breath holding above the void. Then his voice shattered the dead silence. "Let light be." And raw brilliance exploded out of absolutely nowhere. He saw the light was good, dividing brightness straight from the shadowed deep. He called the shining glare day, and the heavy shadow night. Evening bled into morning. Day one. Then the voice thundered, "Let an expanse be." And a massive blue sky rolled out, tearing the waters apart. He forced the lower seas down and lifted the upper waters high, creating space to breathe. He called that massive arch the heavens, a high ceiling over my future home. Evening fell. Morning broke, beating like a heavy heart. The second day. The empty sky waited for the earth to reveal itself. "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered," he said, and the furious oceans pulled together. Bare rock pushed up from the deep. He named it land, and the pooled waters he called seas. He saw it was good, then commanded the dirt to burst into green. Sprout and seed erupted, heavy fruit trees bowing low with life, stretching out across the young soil. Night and morning twisted together. The third day. "Let luminaries be," he declared. Suddenly, massive sentinels filled the dome above, tracking the seasons, marking the endless years. A burning sun to rule my waking hours, a pale moon to guard the dark, and countless stars scattered like hot sparks from his grip. He hung them in the black sky to bathe the earth in light, dividing brilliance from the void. He saw it was good, a burning clock carved into the heavens. Night dissolved into morning, the fourth day. "Let the waters swarm," he said, and the ocean boiled with moving bodies, massive leviathans gliding through the deep. Flocks of wings tore through the blue air, soaring across the open sky. Elohim blessed them all. "Be fruitful and increase. Fill the seas. Let the sky be alive with flight." Silver scales flashed, bright feathers snapped in the wind. For the very first time, my world echoed with chaotic, beautiful noise. Evening fell quiet. Morning broke. The fifth day. "Let the earth bring forth," he commanded, and the dirt crawled with life, grazing herds, creeping insects, fierce predators roaming the wild. He saw it was good. Then a sudden heavy shift in the silence, a terrifying new design. "Let us make humanity in our image, according to our likeness." And so I was torn from the dust. He made us to reflect his own glory, male and female. He handed us dominion over the fish, the birds, and every wild creature roaming the plains. He blessed us, saying, "Be fruitful and increase. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule with care over all I have made." Then he said, "Behold, I have handed you every seed-bearing plant across the globe, and every fruit tree to sustain you. And to the beasts, the birds, and every breathing soul in the dirt, he gave the green fields to devour." The ground answered with thick forests and heavy grain, a massive feast laid out for every living lung. He stared at everything he had built: the bright sun, the deep oceans, beasts, and my own beating heart. And it was deeply good. Evening closed, morning broke, and 6 days of brutal, beautiful creation finally rested. The sky and the dirt were entirely finished. My vast, overwhelming new home stood perfectly complete. By the 7th day, he stopped. He rested from the massive weight of building the world. He blessed that final day, making it completely holy, stepping back from the violent surge of life. These are the written memories of heaven and earth, sealed on the day my Maker forged the sky and the dirt. Picture this with me. Before any green broke the hard crust, before rain ever fell, I was nothing, just empty dirt waiting for a farmer. A heavy mist bled up from below, soaking the barren mud. Then he reached down. My Maker actually knelt in the wet clay, scraping together the dust to shape my body. He leaned close, blowing the raw breath of life straight into my lungs. The mud jolted awake. I became a living soul, standing up inside the breath of God. He planted a lush garden out east in Eden, locking me safely in its shade. He pulled towering trees from the dirt, beautiful and heavy with food. Right in the middle stood the tree of life and the terrible tree of knowing good and evil. A massive river crashed out of Eden to feed the soil, splitting into 4 distinct branches. Pishon wrapped around Havilah, thick with gold and black onyx. Gihon carved through Cush. Hiddekel rushed east toward Ashur, alongside the endless Euphrates. He dropped me right there in the center, commanding me to work the soil and protect it. He looked right at me and warned, "From every single tree here you can freely eat, but that one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you cannot touch it. The exact day you eat its fruit, you will violently die." Later, he watched me wander. "It is not good for you to be alone," he said. "I will make a partner to stand with you." He marched every wild beast and every soaring bird right up to me. I stared at them, gave them their names, defining what they were. But my heart sank. Out of thousands of creatures, I was completely isolated. No one like me. So he forced a dark, heavy sleep over my mind. While I was unconscious, he cut into my side, pulling out a rib, and fused the bare flesh back together. From my own body, he built a woman. When he brought her to me, I gasped, "At last! This is bone of my own bones, flesh of my own flesh. She will be called woman because she was ripped out of man." That is exactly why a man leaves his parents behind, binding himself to his wife until they bleed back into one single flesh. We stood there completely naked, but I felt zero shame. We were wrapped in pure innocence. But then came the serpent, smarter and far more twisted than any other beast roaming the dirt. It slithered through the heavy branches, hissing a smooth, lethal question at my wife. "Did Elohim indeed say, 'You shall not eat from every tree of the garden'?" I watched her stare back, trying to sound confident. "From the fruit of the trees here we may eat, but that tree right in the middle, Elohim said, 'You shall not eat it nor touch it, lest you die.'" The snake leaned closer, dropping a dark, heavy lie into her mind. "You shall not surely die. He just knows the second you taste it, your eyes will blast open. You will be exactly like him, knowing both good and evil." I saw her stare at the fruit. It looked so perfect, pulsing with the promise of secret wisdom. She reached out, bit into it. Then she turned handing it to me. And heaven help me, I ate it too. The world violently shifted. My eyes locked open. Suddenly, I realized how exposed, how naked I truly was. Panicking, we ripped fig leaves from the branches, desperately trying to hide our bodies. Then the wind picked up. I heard his footsteps echoing through the garden. Pure terror crushed my chest. We dove into the thick brush. "Adam, where are you?" His voice boomed. Trembling, I answered, "I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." The voice cut through the leaves. "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you not to eat?" I panicked, pointing the blame. "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I ate." He slowly turned toward her. "What is this you have done?" She broke down. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." His fury locked onto the snake. "Because you have done this, you are cursed above every beast. You will drag yourself on your belly, choking on dust, until the end of your life. I am planting total war between you and the woman, between your bloodline and her true seed. He will utterly crush your head, and you will only strike his heel." Then he looked down at my wife with a heavy sorrow. "I will drastically multiply your pain in childbirth. You will bring new life into a broken world, screaming. You will constantly desire your husband, but he will rule over you." Then his eyes burned into mine. "Because you listened to your wife instead of me, eating the one fruit I explicitly forbade. The very dirt is cursed because of your choice. You will bleed and suffer to pull food from the earth until you die. It will fight you with cruel thorns and toxic weeds. By the desperate sweat of your face, you will survive, until your body finally rots back into the mud. You are nothing but dust, and to the dust you will return." In the silence, I named my broken wife Eve, the mother of every living soul. And in a final act of mercy, God slaughtered an animal, wrapping us in warm, bloody skins. Then I heard him say, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, cursed with knowing good and evil. If he reaches out for the tree of life now, he will live in this broken state forever." So he cast me out. He exiled me from Eden, forcing me to farm the harsh dirt that built my very bones. He locked the eastern gates, posting terrifying cherubim with a spinning sword of fire to block my way home. Out in the cold, I held Eve. She conceived, bearing our first son, whispering, "I have made a man with Yahweh." Then came his brother Abel. Abel raised the sheep, while Cain brutally dug into the cursed earth. Do you feel this exile too? I brought my harvest to the altar, fruit of my own bitter labor. My brother Abel brought his finest flock. God looked at him with love. But me? My offering meant nothing. I felt my face drop, a hot, dark anger burning like coals in my chest. The divine voice pierced my mind. Why so angry? Why this heavy face? Do well and be lifted. But if you fail, sin crouches at your door, hungry for your soul. I couldn't listen. Out in the quiet field, the shadow took over. I struck my own brother down. His blood soaked the dirt. A terrifying, heavy silence fell over the world. Then came that haunting question. Where is your brother? I don't know, I lied, terrified. Am I his keeper? The voice thundered back. What have you done? His blood screams from the earth. You are cursed by the very soil that drank your brother's life from your trembling hands. The ground will give you nothing now. You are in exile. Panic gripped me. My guilt is too heavy. You're driving me into the wasteland, hiding your face from me. I'll be a nameless wanderer, the crushing loneliness. Whoever finds me will kill me. But God marked me, a spiritual brand ensuring my survival, promising sevenfold vengeance on my killer. So I walked away from his presence, into the shadows of Nod, east of Eden. I tried to anchor my lost identity. I had a son, Enoch, and built a whole city in his name. Generations passed, and I felt my lineage fracture. Down to Lamech, who took 2 wives. We built civilization to hide our emptiness. Jabal raised tents and cattle. Jubal crafted harps and flutes to drown the silence. Tubal-Cain forged bronze and iron weapons, hardening our hearts alongside his sister Naamah. Lamech's pride echoed my own darkness. I killed a man just for wounding me. If Cain is avenged 7-fold, I am avenged 77-fold. Meanwhile, the first humans tried to heal the void, bearing another son, naming him Seth. God gave me another seed to replace Abel, she whispered. Seth had a son, Enosh. In that deep despair, we humans finally began crying out to the divine name. This is our human record, created originally in his perfect, unbroken image. Male and female he made us, blessing us with the sacred name human. We carried that spark. Adam lived on, fathering Seth in his own fractured yet divine likeness. Centuries dragged on. I feel the weight of Adam's 930 years before he finally turned to dust. Seth lived, fathering Enosh, filling his tents with children for 912 years, then died. Enosh lived, giving life to Canaan. The cycle of breath and bone continued. Enosh lived 905 years, then faded. Canaan lasted 910. Mahalalel breathed for 895. Jared lived 962 years before death swallowed him. Then came Enoch. But Enoch was entirely different. At 165, he fathered Methuselah, and then he intimately walked with God. His very heartbeat synced with the divine for 365 years. And then, no grave. Death could not claim him. God simply took him. Methuselah lived 969 grueling years before dying. Lamech had a son, Noah, hoping for relief. This boy will comfort our endless toil, he sighed, easing the grief of this cursed earth. Lamech lasted 777 years, then returned to the dust. At 500, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Our human lineage marched blindly through time, endless cycles of blessing and death leading straight to a terrifying vessel of hope. We multiplied, spreading like a virus. Divine beings saw our beautiful daughters and took whoever they wanted. They birthed ancient giants, legendary titans of renown. But God watched our darkness deepen. My spirit won't struggle with human flesh forever, he declared, a chilling verdict on our souls. You get 120 years. He looked at us and saw pure rot. My own heart felt it, every thought twisting into malice day after day. Violence ruled. Blood soaked the dirt. God felt a piercing, heavy grief. He actually regretted making us. I will wipe them all out, he said. Man, beast, birds, all erased. The cosmic regret was absolute. Yet standing in that total moral collapse, I feel Noah finding grace. He was different, flawless in a broken era, walking closely with God. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But everything around us was ruined. Our collective soul was corrupted, overflowing with brutal violence. God finally spoke to Noah. "The end of all flesh is here. The world is destroyed by human cruelty. Now I am going to wash it away." I hear the command echoing in my mind. Build an ark of gopher wood. Seal it with pitch inside and out. Make it massive, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. 3 staggering decks. Put a single door in the side, narrowing to the top. I am unleashing a catastrophic flood. Every breathing thing under heaven will drown. Everything perishes. You and I know that terror of total erasure. But I make a covenant with you. Get in the ark with your family. Bring 2 of every living creature, male and female, to survive the purge. Birds, beasts, creeping insects, 2 of each will come to you. Stockpile enough food to keep you all alive. I feel the sheer weight of that responsibility. But Noah didn't hesitate. He did exactly what the divine voice commanded. Then God said, "Enter the ark. In this dark age, only you are righteous. Take 7 pairs of every clean animal and 2 of the unclean. Bring the birds of the air, 7 by 7, to preserve the spark of life on this doomed earth." 7 days left, he warned. Then 40 days of relentless rain. I will erase every living thing I ever made. Noah obeyed. At 600 years old, the apocalypse began. I can almost feel him stepping into the ark with his family, escaping the surging, violent waters. Animals filed in, pair by pair, exactly as commanded. Then, the terror hit. The deep abyss cracked wide open. The sky shattered. On the 27th day of the 2nd month of Noah's 600th year, the devastating deluge finally swallowed the world. For 40 days, the rain screamed down. Locked inside that wooden shell, they were surrounded by wild beasts, livestock, and birds of every wing. Every creature with breath crowded together in the dark, male and female, just as God promised. Then, God sealed the door from the outside. The isolation was absolute. Surging waters violently lifted the ark into the sky. The ocean conquered everything, swelling until even the highest mountains vanished. 15 cubits above the peaks, nothing but endless, chaotic water. Everything died. Every bird, beast, and human soul wiped from the map. Only Noah's small, trembling family remained afloat in the void. For 150 agonizing days, the water rained. But in that dark isolation, God remembered us in the ark. A divine wind swept the drowned earth. Slowly, the abyss sealed shut. The cracked sky closed, and the rain died. For 150 days, the waters slowly retreated. Finally, in the 7th month, a heavy thud, the ark struck the hidden peaks of Ararat. Water levels dropped until the 10th month. Jagged mountain peaks pierced the surface like islands of a reborn world. After 40 more days, Noah cracked open a window. He released a raven, watching it fly back and forth across the terrifying, drying wasteland. Then he released a dove, hoping the ground was safe. But finding only an ocean of ruin, she flew back. He gently pulled her inside. 7 days later, he tried again. At twilight, she returned. There, clamped in her beak, was a fresh olive leaf. Like you and me surviving our own floods, he knew the devastating waters had finally receded. I waited 7 more endless days. The dove never came back. In my 601st year, on the very first day, the great waters finally retreated. Have you ever felt that profound isolation? I tore back the heavy covering of the ark, looked out, and saw dry wasteland. By the 27th day of the 2nd month, the cracked earth baked under the sun. Then the Creator's voice shattered my silence. "Come out," he commanded. "You, your wife, your sons. Bring every trembling creature with you. Let them swarm this empty world. Be fruitful. Fill the silence." I stepped out into the devastating quiet, my family and the surviving beasts trailing behind. Desperate for grace, I built a crude stone altar offering the clean animals to the sky. The Creator accepted the smoke, whispering a promise. He would never curse this broken ground again, despite the dark sickness in human hearts. "I will never again wipe away all flesh," the voice echoed. "As long as the earth breathes, the seasons, the cold, the days and nights will survive." He blessed me and my sons, telling us to conquer the ruins. Yet he warned that sheer terror would now exist between us and every wild creature. "They are surrendered to your hands. Every moving thing is now yours to consume, just like the green plants. But never eat flesh with its lifeblood, because for your own blood, I demand a heavy price. Whether by beast or by your own brother, I will avenge your blood. Whoever sheds human blood will bleed by human hands, for you carry the very image of your Maker." The command hung heavy over my fragile family. Multiply, swarm, and somehow rule this broken land. The voice washed over me and my boys. "Listen, I am forging a bond with you, your unborn descendants, and every survivor pulled from that wooden shell. Never again will the dark floodwaters rise to erase humanity. No global ocean will ever swallow the dry earth again." The Creator made his absolute decree. "Here is the eternal proof of our pact," he told me. "I am hanging my vibrant bow across the bruised storm clouds. Whenever dark skies threaten your fragile peace, and that light breaks through, I will remember the promise. The raging deep will never return to drown you, or the creatures shivering by your side. When that bow strikes the sky, I will see it and remember this permanent bond with every breathing soul." He assured me this was our ultimate seal of safety. The 3 boys standing with me, the ones who survived the end of the world, were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham fathered Canaan. We 3 brothers were the seeds of a new world. I was a farmer, desperate to forget the trauma, so I planted vines. I drank until the nightmare faded, passed out naked in my tent. My son Ham saw my brokenness and mocked me, but Shem and Japheth walked backward, silently covering my deep, drunken shame. I woke from the heavy wine and realized how my own son had humiliated me. "Canaan is cursed," I swore bitterly. "He will be a slave to his brothers. Let the Creator bless Shem, and let Canaan serve him. May God expand Japheth to live peacefully with Shem, while Canaan serves." I carried the trauma of the flood for 350 more years. At 950, my exhausted lungs finally gave out. Our family tree exploded after the floodwaters receded. My sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, scattered their seed to form the ancient nations. Japheth's bloodline birthed Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Then came the violent generations of Ashkenaz, Rephath, Togarmah, Tarshish, and Kittim. We watched our descendants push into the coastal lands, splintering into different tribes and harsh new tongues. Ham's dark line bred Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Soon Cush fathered Nimrod, a terrifying warrior. He was the first mortal to truly crave total dominance, hunting both beasts and men. They used to whisper his name in awe, like Nimrod, the ruthless hunter. I saw him build massive empires, Babylon, Erech, Akkad. The obsession for power spread like a virus. Ashur marched out to build enormous walled cities like Nineveh and Calah. Meanwhile, Mizraim's bloodline quietly birthed the feared Philistines. Canaan's cursed line clawed for survival, fathering Sidon and Heth. We watched anxiously as his hostile tribes multiplied. Amorites, Jebusites, Hivites. The violent Canaanite clans exploded across the bleeding ancient landscape. Their heavy borders pushed to Gaza, stretching all the way to the doomed cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. But I trace my own exhausted soul through Shem, the older brother. Our proud family tree birthed Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. Aram's boys were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. We passed the memory down. Arphaxad gave us Shelah, who fathered Eber. I remember Eber's two sons, Peleg, because during his bitter lifetime our entire world was brutally split apart, and Joktan. Joktan went on to breed 13 restless tribes, including Sheba, Ophir, and Havilah. We pitched our tents from Mesha to the eastern hills of Sephar. These were our clans, fractured by new borders and bizarre languages. This is how my family tree shattered into scattered tribes, aggressively dividing the globe after the great waters finally dried. Back then, you and I would have understood every word spoken on earth. One shared tongue. As we marched east into Shinar, we grew arrogant. "Let's bake bricks," I told my brothers. We used thick tar for mortar, obsessed with power. We craved a towering city that could pierce the actual heavens. "We have to make a name for ourselves," I shouted, terrified of fading into exile. But the Creator came down, watching our pathetic bricks stack up. "They are one people," he noted, seeing the dangerous pride rotting our hearts. "If they do this, their dark ambition will have absolutely no limits." The judgment was swift. "Let us go down and completely break their language until they can't recognize their own brother's voice." Panic set in. Suddenly, we couldn't understand a single word. We abandoned the great tower, violently scattered across the unknown earth. We called that ruin Babel, a monument to our absolute confusion. I trace my survival back to Shem, who fathered Arphaxad just 2 years after the flood. We carried our lonely exile for centuries. Shem lived 500 more years. His blood passed to Arphaxad, then Canaan, Shelah, and Eber. We remember Eber's boy Peleg, who saw our society brutally fracture at Babel, at his brother Joktan. Through the silence, the line finally reached Ru, Serug, Nahor, and Terah. Terah fathered me, Abram. My brother Haran died young in our wealthy hometown, Ur of the Chaldeans, leaving his boy Lot behind. I married Sarai, while my other brother Nahor married Milcah. But my heart carried a quiet, suffocating agony. My wife Sarai was barren. We had no future. Desperate for meaning, my father Terah packed our entire lives. He dragged me, Sarai, and my nephew Lot out of Ur aiming for Canaan. But we stalled halfway, settling in a dusty town called Haran. We stayed trapped there until my father finally died at 205. Then the terrifying, beautiful voice found me. "Leave everything he demanded. Leave your country, your father's ghost, and your comfort. Walk blind into a land I will reveal to you. I will forge a massive nation from your empty lineage. I will bless you, curse your enemies, and heal every shattered family on earth through you. What would you do? At 75 years old, I obeyed. I packed up Sarai, Lot, every last servant, and every piece of gold we owned. We abandoned Haran and marched straight into the hostile unknown of Canaan. We didn't stop pushing until we reached the massive shadow-casting oak of Shechem. The brutal Canaanites already ruled that territory. I was an intruder. But the Creator appeared to me again, whispering, I will give this exact dirt to your unborn children. Terrified but full of faith, I stacked stones for an altar, then fled deeper into the eastern hills between Bethel and Ai. I pitched my lonely tent and built another altar, desperately calling on his name. We pushed south toward the Negev. Then, a brutal famine hit. Starving and terrified, I dragged my family down to Egypt. Staring at that massive empire, I turned to Sarai, my heart pounding. I stared at my beautiful wife, terrified of what Egypt would do to us. When they see you, they will kill me and take you, I whispered, the weight of my own cowardice pressing down. Please, just say you are my sister. Let my life be spared. Have you ever let fear completely strip away your identity? The moment we crossed into Egypt, the eyes of the empire locked onto her. Pharaoh's men saw her. They took her right into his palace, and I stood there frozen. I was paid off with sheep, cattle, servants, and camels, the hollow wealth of a broken man. But the divine struck Pharaoh's house with unseen plagues. Soon the mighty king summoned me, his voice shaking with anger. What have you done to me? Why hide that she was your wife? Why lie so I would take her? Pharaoh demanded. Take her and get out. His men marched us out of Egypt, my shame heavier than the gold I carried. We headed back toward the Negev. My wife, my nephew Lot, and my mountains of hollow possessions were all beside me. I had survived, but at what cost? I felt completely exiled from the man I was supposed to be. I was drowning in silver, gold, and livestock. We drifted, wandering until I found my way back to Bethel, right back to where I first pitched my tent. I stood before my old altar and desperately called out to the Creator again. Lot was with me, his own herds and tents multiplying like a shadow over my weary soul. But the ground could not hold us both. Our endless wealth choked the soil. Bitter fights broke out between my men and Lot's men, right while the Canaanites watched from the edges. The pressure was suffocating. I looked at my nephew, feeling the deep ache of a fractured family. Let there be no bad blood between us, I pleaded, or between our camps. We are blood. Look at this vast expanse before us. We have to separate. If you take the left path, I will walk right. If you want the right, I will go left. Lot stared at the Jordan plain. It was lush, green as the original garden, wealthy like the Egypt we had just escaped. He took the best part and walked east. Just like that, the quiet desert split us apart. I stayed in the harsh hills of Canaan, while Lot drifted down into the valley's dark embrace, moving his tents dangerously close to Sodom. Those cities were rotten, filled with men violently opposed to the divine order. I felt so alone after Lot left. Then a voice broke through my isolation. Lift your eyes right now. Look north, south, east, and west. This whole ruined earth you see, I give to you and your bloodline forever. I will scatter your children like dust across the ground. If a man can count the dust, he can count your future. Stand up. Walk the length of this empty dirt, for it is yours. So I pulled up my tent pegs. I wandered until I settled under the massive oaks of Mamre, resting my weary bones in Hebron. I built another altar there. Soon the world erupted into violence. 4 eastern warlords, kings of Shinar, Elasar, Elam, and distant nations, marched their armies to wage war. They hunted the rebel kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela. 5 desperate rulers clashed against 4 vicious conquerors down in the valley of Siddim, near the dead salty sea. Those cities had bled tribute for 12 long years before finally snapping. By the 14th year, the eastern armies returned, crushing every tribe in their path, ancient giants and desert wanderers alike. They slaughtered their way back through the mountains. Cornered and desperate, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah dragged their broken forces out into the open to fight. But that valley was a trap, choked with sticky black tar pits. Sodom and Gomorrah's kings panicked. Men sank screaming into the slime, while the survivors fled into the mountains. The conquerors stripped the cities bare. They stole every scrap of food, and worse, they dragged my nephew Lot away into the dark. A bleeding survivor finally reached my camp under the great oaks. I was just a Hebrew outsider, living quietly beside my Amorite allies. Hearing my own blood was chained up in the dark, something inside me snapped. I grabbed 318 of my own men and hunted those kings down. Under the cover of midnight, we struck hard and fast. I chased them deep into the north, ripping Lot, the women, and all the stolen lives back from their grip. Walking home covered in dust and blood, the ruined king of Sodom crept out to meet me in the valley. Then a mystery appeared. Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of the highest, brought out bread and wine. He blessed me right there in the dirt. Blessed are you by the Creator of all. He handed your enemies over to you. I gave that strange priest 1/10 of everything. Sodom's king sneered, offering me the loot if I just handed back the people. I looked him dead in the eye. I swear to the highest God, I growled, I won't take a single thread or broken sandal from you. You will never get to say you bought my soul or made me rich. I want nothing but the food my men already ate, and the fair share for the allies who fought beside me. Later, the silence of my tent was broken by a terrifying vision. Do not be afraid, the voice echoed. I am your shield. I am your ultimate prize. My heart pounded. Lord, I cried out, what could you possibly give me now? I am a hollow, childless old man. A hired servant from Damascus is set to inherit everything I have built. You promised me a legacy, but left my hands empty. The voice cut through my self-pity. That servant will not take your place. A son from your own flesh will be your heir. The Spirit pulled me out into the freezing night. Look up at the black sky, he commanded. Try to count the stars, if you even can. That is how many children you will have. In that quiet dark, my doubts shattered. I simply believed him, and that raw trust was carved into my soul as righteousness. I brought you out of your ancient home to give you this very dirt, he whispered. My fear crept back. Lord, how can I be absolutely sure this will happen? He answered, bring me a 3-year-old cow, goat, and ram, plus a dove and a pigeon. I dragged them to the altar, slicing the heavy beasts in half, making a bloody path in the dirt. Vultures swarmed the dead flesh, but I fought them off, exhausted. As the sun died, a heavy, unnatural sleep crushed me into the ground. Pure dread wrapped around my throat. A terrifying darkness swallowed me whole. The voice spoke from the void. Know this: your children will be strangers in a hostile empire. They will be crushed into slavery for 400 years. But I will break that nation, and your people will walk out rich. You, however, will die in quiet peace, buried as an old man. It will take 4 generations before they return here, waiting for the sins of the Amorites to finally peak. When it was pitch black, a bizarre vision appeared. A smoking furnace and a floating fire passed right through the bloody animal halves. Right then, a cosmic contract was sealed. I give this entire map to your bloodline, the voice promised, from the edge of Egypt all the way to the great Euphrates. Every wicked tribe out there will be yours. But years dragged on. My wife Sarai still couldn't have a child. The silence of our empty tent was deafening. She owned a young Egyptian servant named Hagar. One night, my wife broke. "Look at me," she wept. "God has locked my womb. Sleep with my servant. Maybe I can build a family through her." It was a failure of faith, and I caved. After 10 long years in Canaan, she handed Hagar over to me. I crossed that line, and Hagar quickly got pregnant. But the moment the girl knew there was life inside her, she looked at my wife with pure disgust. The fallout was immediate. Sarai turned on me. "This is your fault. I put my servant in your arms, and now she treats me like trash. Let God judge who is wrong here." I washed my hands of the mess, just like a coward. "She is your servant," I said coldly. "Do whatever you want with her." Sarai became completely ruthless. She broke the girl down until Hagar finally ran away into the wasteland. I learned later that a divine spirit found her near a desert spring, alone on the road to Shur. "Hagar," the voice asked, "where are you running to?" She wept, admitting she was fleeing from the harsh face of my wife. Instead of offering an easy escape, the spirit told her something impossible. "Go back to your mistress. Walk right back into the fire. But I will expand your bloodline until it cannot be counted. You will have a boy. Name him Ishmael, because heaven has heard your misery. Your son will be a wild, untamable force. He will fight the world, and the world will fight him right back. He will live in total defiance of all his brothers." Hagar gave a new name to the God who found her in the dirt. "You are the God who sees." She realized the divine wasn't blind to a discarded slave. They named that desert well for the living one who sees our hidden shame. She came back, and when my son was finally born, I named the boy Ishmael, just as she was told. I was 86 when that boy arrived. You and I both know how time slips away when we wait on a promise. By the time I turned 99, God appeared to me once again. "I am the Almighty," he said. "Walk blamelessly before me. I am making my final pact with you." Have you ever felt your very identity being rewritten by God? I collapsed into the dirt, terrified. The divine voice stripped away everything I knew. "My pact is with you," he commanded. "Your old self is dead. I rename you Abraham, father of multitudes." I felt the crushing weight of destiny. Empires and kings would somehow bleed from my fractured life. The voice echoed through my bones, sealing an eternal agreement with me and the descendants I could not yet see. "I will be your God, he declared, and the God of your bloodline. He handed me the very soil under my feet, the terrifying, untamed land of Canaan, as a permanent inheritance. But this profound connection demanded a heavy price. God warned me that I and every generation after me had to fiercely protect this sacred pact. Then came the condition, intimate and bloody. Every male among you must be circumcised, he commanded. This wound in our very flesh would serve as the inescapable bond, a permanent physical reminder of faith. Every boy, just 8 days old, and every man in my household, no matter where they came from, had to bear this painful, transforming seal. Our bodies themselves would carry his everlasting promise. Any man refusing this mark would be exiled, severed from our people forever for shattering the pact. Then, the divine turned to my deepest heartache. Your wife, Sarai, is no more. Her name is now Sarah. In that breath, he promised the impossible. I would finally have a son through her. Whole nations and mighty kings would eventually rise from her barren womb. I buried my face in the dirt and actually laughed. It was madness. I am 100 years old. Sarah is 90. How could we create life? Desperate, I begged God to just bless Ishmael, the son I already had. But the divine was absolute. No. Sarah will give birth to your son. You will name him Isaac. My eternal bond will rest with Isaac, he insisted. Yet he saw my quiet agony over Ishmael. God promised to prosper my firstborn, multiplying his lineage into 12 royal tribes and a massive empire. But the sacred anchor of faith, the true covenant, belonged solely to Isaac. The impossible child Sarah would somehow deliver to me exactly 1 year from now. The divine presence withdrew, leaving me alone in the blinding silence. My heart raced, but I did not hesitate. I gathered Ishmael and every single man under my roof. That very afternoon, we shed our blood. We carved the mark into our flesh, obeying the terrifying command exactly. I was 99 years old, bearing the blade's sting alongside my 13-year-old boy, Ishmael. Before the sun set, my son, myself, and every man in my camp had been permanently transformed. Later, sitting by my tent in the suffocating desert heat, the sacred veil tore open again. I looked up. 3 strangers stood silently in the shimmering distance. A profound dread and awe seized me. I sprinted toward them, collapsing face first into the dirt. "My Lord," I pleaded, feeling entirely unworthy. "Please do not walk past me. Let me fetch water, wash the dust from your feet, and rest in the shade. Let me bring you food to restore your strength," I begged, desperate to serve the divine. They quietly agreed. Panic and purpose flooded my veins. I rushed to Sarah, urging her to quickly bake bread. I ran to the herd, slaughtered a prime calf, and had it cooked. I laid the meat, milk, and curds before these otherworldly guests, standing in trembling silence while they ate. Then they spoke. "Where is your wife, Sarah?" I swallowed hard. "Inside the tent," I replied. The messenger's voice carried the weight of eternity. "I will return next year, and Sarah will finally hold a son." I knew Sarah was eavesdropping. We were ancient. Her youth was a distant memory. Hidden in the shadows, she laughed bitterly to herself, wondering how our dying bodies could ever create life. God confronted me instantly. Why did Sarah laugh? Does she think anything is impossible for the divine? He reiterated the terrifying promise of a son. Petrified of being exposed, Sarah lied from the tent, claiming she hadn't laughed. "No," the voice countered sharply. "You did." The mysterious men then stood up, turning their gaze toward the sinful city of Sodom. Feeling a heavy dread, I followed them. I felt God deliberating within my own mind. Should I hide my dark plans from Abraham? The divine had tied my identity to a massive legacy, promising that humanity's salvation would run through my blood. I was chosen to teach my future children the brutal, beautiful burden of living out divine justice and absolute righteousness. Then God broke the silence. The cries against Sodom and Gomorrah are deafening. Their corruption is absolute. I am going down to witness their darkness myself. As the figures walked toward the doomed city, I stood frozen before the Creator. My nephew Lot lived there. Heart-pounding, I stepped closer and challenged the divine. "Will you truly slaughter the innocent alongside the guilty?" "What if there are 50 good souls trapped inside?" I pleaded, my voice shaking. "You are the judge of the cosmos. You must do what is right." The Lord agreed to spare the city for 50. Desperation consumed me. Put yourself in my shoes. Would you haggle with God? I fought for their lives. "What if there are only 45? I asked. God promised mercy for 45. Pushing my luck against the Almighty, I asked again. "What if you only find 40? I whispered. He spared it for 40. Terrified of his wrath, I begged, "Please don't be angry, Lord. But what about 30? He yielded. I was standing on the edge of an abyss, fighting for human lives. "I know I am just dust," I pushed forward. "But what if there are only 20? Again, he promised salvation for 20. Sweating and exhausted, I made one final plea. "Please, just one more time. What if there are only 10? God promised to hold back the fire for 10 righteous souls. Then, the divine presence vanished, leaving me alone in the dark. I walked back to my tent, haunted. Meanwhile, as shadows consumed the valley, those two divine messengers walked right into Sodom, where my nephew Lot sat waiting. Later, I learned of his absolute terror. He had bowed to the dirt, begging the strangers to hide inside his home before fleeing at dawn. They wanted to sleep in the open square, but Lot knew the city's madness. He forced them inside, locking the doors tight. He baked unfermented bread and fed them in a desperate, tense silence. The nightmare I feared became a horrific reality. Every man in Sodom, young and old, swarmed his house like predators. They screamed for the strangers, demanding to violate them. Trapped, my nephew stepped outside, pulling the door shut to face the mob alone. "Please, brothers, don't commit this evil," he begged. In his blind panic to protect his sacred guests, he offered his own virgin daughters to the violent crowd instead. He sacrificed everything to keep those men safe under his roof. But the mob spat at him. "Move!" they snarled. "You're just a foreigner and you dare judge us? We'll tear you apart before we take them." The crowd surged forward, ready to crush Lot and shatter the door. Suddenly, divine hands reached out from the darkness, dragged Lot back inside, and slammed the heavy door shut. The messengers cursed the screaming mob with sudden blindness. The attackers clawed at the walls, exhausted and lost in complete darkness. The heavenly visitors turned to Lot, sealing the city's fate. "Gather anyone you love," they warned. "We are going to obliterate this place. The corruption has triggered God's wrath." Lot ran to warn his sons-in-law, but they just laughed at him, blind to the approaching apocalypse. As dawn cracked the horizon, the angels commanded him to run with his wife and daughters before the inferno consumed them all. Paralyzed by fear, Lot hesitated, but God's mercy was brutal. The messengers physically grabbed his family by the hands, dragging them out of the condemned city. "Run for your life," they ordered. "Do not look back. Flee to the mountains or you will die." Terrified of the wild hills, Lot begged to hide in the tiny village of Zor instead. The angels, remarkably, let him go there. The sun broke exactly as Lot reached Zor. Then, the sky ripped open. God unleashed a terrifying storm of burning sulfur over Sodom and Gomorrah. The fire vaporized the cities, the people, and every living plant. But the trauma was too much. Lot's wife glanced back at her burning past, instantly hardening into a lifeless pillar of salt. At dawn, I stood trembling where I had pleaded with God. I stared down at the valley. Dense black smoke choked the horizon like a massive slaughterhouse furnace. God had remembered my prayers, pulling Lot from the ashes, but the horror broke my nephew. Word reached me later. Too terrified to stay in civilization, he fled into a dark cave with his daughters. Isolated and desperate, the older sister whispered a twisted plan, convinced they were the last humans left. "We must drug him with wine and sleep with him to save our bloodline," she decided. That night, she crept into his bed. He was too drunk to know what happened in the dark. The very next night, the younger daughter repeated the grim betrayal. Trauma had bred incest. Both women fell pregnant by their own father. The eldest bore a son, calling him Moab, meaning, "from my father." That child birthed the Moabite nation. The younger sister named her newborn Ben-Ami, the ancestor of the Ammonites. I carried the weight of this spiritual exile. Moving into the harsh desert of the Negev, the old fears gripped me again. To protect my own life, I cowardly told everyone my wife Sarah was just my sister. Because of my lie, Abimelech, the local king, abducted Sarah for his harem. My failure almost ruined everything. But God invaded the king's sleep, whispering a deadly warning. "You are a dead man. The woman you stole belongs to another." Terrified, having not yet touched her, Abimelech cried out in the darkness, "Lord, are you going to wipe out an innocent people because of a lie?" "Abraham himself told me she was his sister," the king pleaded. "Even Sarah agreed. I took her with pure intentions and clean hands." The divine voice softened, acknowledging his ignorance. "I know your heart was honest," God replied in the dream. "That is exactly why I paralyzed your desires. I stopped you from committing a grave sin against me, keeping your hands entirely off of her. Now return her," God warned. "Despite his brokenness, he is my prophet. Let his ancient struggle become the psychological map of your own soul." Have you ever lied because you were terrified of losing your identity? I did. King Abimelech was warned in a dream, "Return my wife or face death." He woke up terrified, gathered his servants, and the fear in that room was suffocating. Then he summoned me. "What have you done to us?" he demanded. "How did I sin against you that you dragged this biblical curse onto my kingdom? You've done the unthinkable to me." The king stared right through me. "What possessed you to do this?" I stood there, totally exposed. "I was afraid," I confessed. "I thought there was no fear of God here. I believed you would murder me for her." I clung to a half-truth to survive. She actually is my half-sister, my father's daughter who became my wife. Fear blinded me. When the divine tore me away from my father's house, I explained, I begged her to protect me. I told her, "Just say I am your brother." My spiritual journey felt like a map of endless exile. Surprisingly, the king did not execute me. Instead, Abimelech showered me with livestock and servants, and finally, he gave Sarah back to me. He pointed to the horizon. "My land is entirely yours," he said. "Settle wherever you choose." Then he turned to Sarah, handing over 1,000 silver pieces. "This covers your brother's offense," he told her. "Your honor is fully restored before everyone." The weight of my failure crushed me. I fell to my knees and prayed desperately to the Creator. In His mercy, God lifted the curse, healing the king, his wife, and his household, allowing new life to finally bloom again. The Almighty had shut every womb in that palace because of my deception with Sarah. But heaven had not forgotten us. The Creator moved in our lives just as promised in those ancient texts. Against all biological reality, Sarah conceived. I was an old, weary man when my son was finally born, exactly when God said he would be. I named him Isaac. On his 8th day, I circumcised him, honoring the sacred covenant. I was a century old. 100 years of waiting, doubting, and wandering. Sarah held the boy and smiled, saying, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone will laugh with me." Who could have ever predicted I would nurse a baby? Yet here he is. Our long spiritual winter was over. As Isaac grew strong, the day came to wean him, and I threw a massive, joyous celebration for my heir. But the joy shattered. Sarah caught Ishmael, my son, with Hagar, mocking the boy. Her eyes grew cold. "Banish that slave and her child," she demanded. "He will never share an inheritance with my Isaac." My heart broke into pieces. Ishmael was my blood, my son. The pain of losing him tore at my soul. But the divine whispered in the dark, "Do not despair over the boy. Listen to Sarah. Your true legacy flows only through Isaac. I will make a great nation from him too," God promised, "because he carries your seed." Before dawn, numb with grief, I packed bread and a single water skin. I handed them to Hagar, kissed my son goodbye, and sent them into the brutal unknown. They wandered the desolate Beersheba wasteland. When the water ran dry, Hagar placed my boy under a dying bush. She walked away, unable to watch him perish, and collapsed in bitter tears. But heaven hears the cries of the abandoned. An angel called down from the silent sky, "Why are you crying, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God hears the boy's weeping. Stand up, hold him close. His descendants will shake the earth." Suddenly her vision cleared, and she spotted a hidden well of fresh water. She frantically filled the skin, pouring life back into my son's dry lips. The divine presence shielded him out there. He grew up wild and free in the Paran desert, becoming a master archer. Eventually, Hagar found him an Egyptian bride. Meanwhile, I was still navigating my own fragile existence. King Abimelech and his general approached me, seeing the invisible hand on my life. "God clearly backs your every move," the king said. "Swear to me right now, no more lies. Promise you will treat my bloodline and this land with the same mercy I showed you." I gave my solemn oath. But I also confronted the king about a water well his men had stolen. Abimelech looked shocked. "I have no idea who did this," he claimed. "You never told me. I am only hearing about it today." I silently pulled 7 young lambs from my flock. Confused, the king asked, "What are these animals for?" "Take them," I said, "as proof that my hands dug this well." That ground became Beersheba, the well of the oath. After sealing our treaty, the king and his general marched home. Left alone, I planted a tamarisk tree in that soil. Under its shade, I called out to the eternal Creator, searching for roots in a world where I was still a wanderer. I lived as an outsider for years. You and I know the dread of waiting for disaster. Then, the ultimate test arrived. The voice pierced my soul. "Abraham!" I whispered, "I am here." The next words destroyed my universe. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. On a mountain I will reveal." I did not sleep. At first light, moving like a ghost, I saddled my donkey. I cut the firewood myself. Taking 2 servants and my beloved Isaac, we began the death march. 3 days of silent agony later, I saw the dreaded peak in the distance. I turned to my men. "Wait here. The boy and I will go worship, and we will come back." I strapped the heavy wood to Isaac's back. In my trembling hands, I carried the fire and the blade. We walked into the silence. "Father?" he asked. I swallowed my panic. "I am here, my boy." Isaac looked around. "We have the fire and wood, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" My heart shattered. "God will provide the lamb, my son," I choked out. We kept walking, reaching the grim summit. Moving like a dead man, I built the stone altar. I arranged the wood. I bound my son, laying him on the pyre. Tears blinding me, I raised the knife to end my legacy. Suddenly, a voice ripped through the sky. "Abraham! Abraham!" I froze. "I am here," I cried. The angelic messenger commanded, "Drop the blade. Do not touch the boy. Now I know you truly revere the divine, for you did not withhold your only son from me." I collapsed, breathing heavily. Looking up, I saw a ram, its horns tangled in the brush. I grabbed it, sacrificing the animal in my boy's place. I named that lonely mountain Yahweh Yireh. The Lord will provide. The nightmare was over. Even today, people whisper about that sacred peak. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Before I could leave, the heavens opened one more time. "I swear by my own name," the voice declared, "because you actually did this, because you surrendered your absolute most precious possession, I will pour out blessings. I will multiply your bloodline until they outnumber the stars in the black sky and the sand on the beach. Your descendants will conquer their enemies. Through your lineage, every nation on earth will find a blessing, all because you obeyed my voice." I untied Isaac. We walked down to my waiting servants, completely transformed, and returned home to Beersheba. During this quiet season, news finally arrived from my distant homeland. I learned my brother Nahor had built a family. Milcah gave him 8 sons: Uz, Buz, Kemuel, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. This Bethuel eventually fathered Rebekah. Meanwhile, Nahor's concubine, Reumah, bore 4 more boys: Teba, Gaham, Tahash, and Makkah. My estranged family tree was rapidly branching out in the east. Sarah lived to be 127. Then, in the dusty Canaanite town of Hebron, her breath finally stopped. I sat beside her body, weeping until I was empty. The tent felt suffocatingly silent. You and I eventually have to face the graves of those we love most. I forced myself to stand up, wiped my face, and approached the local Hittite leaders. "I am just a wandering stranger here," I admitted. "Please, sell me a small piece of land. I need a burial place to lay my wife to rest." The local leaders looked at me with respect. "Listen to us, sir," they replied. "You walk among us like a prince of God. Choose the finest tomb we have. Not a single man here would ever deny you their family burial ground." Humbled, I bowed low to the earth. "If you truly want to help a grieving man," I pleaded, "speak to Ephron. Ask him to sell me the cave of Machpelah, right at the edge of his property. I will pay the full market price. I just want a permanent resting place among you." Ephron happened to be sitting right there in the city council. He spoke up loudly for everyone to hear. "No, my lord, absolutely not," Ephron declared. "I am giving you the field and the cave along with it. With all my people as witnesses, it is yours. Bury your dead." It was a generous gesture, but a free gift meant I had no legal claim. I bowed again, resolute. "Please listen to me. I insist on paying the full price for the land. Take my money so I can bury her with honor." Ephron sighed. "The land is worth 400 pieces of silver. But what is that between friends? Bury your wife." I didn't argue. I immediately weighed out the exact 400 shekels using standard merchant weights right in front of the council. The transaction was done. That patch of earth at Machpelah near Mamre became my permanent anchor. The field, the dark cave, and every single tree inside those lines were legally transferred to me, witnessed by the city. And there, in the quiet shadows of Machpelah near Hebron in Canaan, I laid my beautiful Sarah to rest. I was no longer just a ghost. That cave became my first real piece of the promised land. My body grew frail with age, though heaven had blessed my spiritual journey immensely. But one massive anxiety kept me awake. My son Isaac needed a wife. She couldn't be from these local Canaanite tribes. She had to be from my own bloodline. I summoned my oldest, most trusted servant. I made him place his hand under my thigh, demanding a sacred oath in the name of the Lord, the God of the universe. "Do not marry him to a local," I commanded. "Travel back to my homeland, to my relatives, and bring a wife for Isaac. The Creator who pulled me from obscurity will send an angel ahead of you." My servant swore the oath. He packed 10 camels heavy with my finest treasures and vanished into the horizon, carrying our future. Have you ever felt the crushing weight of a destiny chosen for you? I am Isaac. My story begins far away when my father's servant made his camels kneel at a well in Nahor. He prayed for a sign from Yahweh. Before his prayer even ended, Rebekah walked out of the dusk, a heavy water jar resting on her shoulder. She was striking, untouched. The servant rushed over, begging for just a sip. She didn't just water him. She drew water for every thirsty camel. He watched her in pure silence. Then, placing heavy gold bracelets on her wrists, he finally asked the question, "Who is your father?" "I am Bethuel's daughter," she told him. "We have room for you to stay." Overwhelmed, my father's servant fell to the dirt, praising Yahweh for guiding his steps. Rebekah bolted home with the news. Her brother Laban saw that heavy gold, heard the tale, and rushed out. "Come in," Laban urged. They brought out food, but the servant refused to eat. He laid out his entire mission, the prayer, the well, the divine answer. Hearing this, her family surrendered. "This is Yahweh's doing. Take her for your master's son." He bowed, handing over silver and rich garments. By dawn, he wanted to leave. Her family begged for 10 more days, but he pushed back. They called Rebecca in. She simply said, "I will go." They blessed her to mother thousands and conquer enemies. And just like that, she rode off into the desert, leaving her past behind. I remember standing in the fields that evening, lost in my own grief. I looked up. The caravan was approaching. Rebecca saw me, slipped off her camel, and covered her face with a veil. The servant told me everything. I brought her into my late mother's tent. She became my wife. I truly loved her. After losing my mother, Rebecca was my only comfort. Then, my father Abraham's long life finally ended at 175. We laid him deep in the cave of Machpelah, right next to Sarah, in the very field he bought years ago. My brother Ishmael and I buried him together. The ancient covenant fell entirely on me. As for Ishmael, he built his own empire. He fathered 12 warrior princes, their tribe stretching from Egypt all the way toward Assyria. He lived 137 years, leaving behind a fierce, independent legacy, always living in the shadows of conflict, completely separate from my path. I was 40 when we married, carrying the heavy title, the Son of Promise. But Rebecca couldn't have children. I begged Yahweh for an heir, and he finally answered. She conceived, but a violent war immediately began inside her womb. Terrified, she asked Yahweh why. He warned her. 2 rival nations were tearing at each other inside her. The older would serve the younger. Soon, twins arrived. The first came out red, covered in thick hair. We named him Esau. The second followed, gripping his brother's heel. We called him Jacob. I was 60. The boys couldn't have been more different. Esau was a wild, restless hunter. Jacob stayed quiet, hiding in the tents. I favored Esau's wild spirit, but Rebecca loved Jacob. One afternoon, Esau stumbled in from hunting, absolutely starving. Jacob was cooking red stew. Esau begged for a bowl. Jacob saw his chance. "Sell me your birthright." Exhausted and desperate, Esau threw his entire identity away. "I am dying of hunger. What good is a birthright?" Jacob made him swear it. He traded his future for a single bowl of food. He ate, drank, and walked off, completely despising his sacred inheritance. The destiny of nations shifted right there, not by strength, but through a calculated theft that Yahweh had already seen coming. Then famine struck again, starving the land just like in my father's time. I fled to Gerar, to King Abimelech. Yahweh warned me in a vision, "Do not run to Egypt. Stay here. I will bless you and give you these lands, keeping the ancient oath I swore to Abraham. Your descendants will outnumber the stars." So I stayed. But paranoia set in. You know how fear twists a man. Rebecca was beautiful. To save my life, I called her my sister, until Abimelech caught me holding her. "She is your wife," he yelled. "Why say she is your sister? You could have cursed us all." Abimelech ordered that anyone who touched us would be executed. Despite my cowardice, Yahweh blessed me. My wealth exploded, flocks, herds, servants. The locals hated me. They choked my father's wells with dirt. Finally, Abimelech demanded I leave. "Go," he said. "You are too powerful." I retreated into the valley, digging up Abraham's old wells and giving back their names. We hit fresh water, but the locals fought us for it. I named the first well Contention, the second Hostility. Finally, they left the third alone. I called it Wide Spaces. Yahweh has finally given us room to breathe, I said. I moved to Beersheba. That very night, Yahweh spoke in the dark. I am the Elohim of Abraham. Do not be afraid. I am with you. I will multiply your descendants for his sake. I built an altar right there, calling on his name. But Abimelech showed up again with his commanders. I was bitter. Why are you here? You hated me. You banished me. They backed down. We see Yahweh is with you. Let's make a treaty. We let you go in peace. You are truly blessed, they admitted. I threw a feast, and we swore an oath. That afternoon, my men struck water again. But peace didn't last. At 40, my son Esau married 2 local Hittite women, breaking our most sacred tradition. Those marriages poisoned our home with grief, a dark cloud over Yahweh's blessing. As I grew old, my vision failed completely. Surrounded by darkness, I called for Esau, desperate to give him my final blessing before I died. Take your bow, I told him. Hunt for me. Make that savory meat I love, so I can bless you. I didn't know Rebekah was listening. Remembering the prophecy, she ran straight to Jacob. Bring me 2 goats, she ordered him. I will cook them. You will steal your father's blessing. Jacob panicked. Esau is hairy. I'm smooth. If he touches me, he will curse me. Rebekah didn't flinch. Let the curse fall on me. Just obey. She dressed him in Esau's clothes, wrapping rough goat skins over his hands and neck. He entered my darkness. Father, I couldn't see. Who are you? I am Esau, your firstborn, he lied. Eat and bless me. Suspicion clawed at me. How did you hunt so fast? Yahweh brought it, he answered. I touched him. The voice was Jacob's, but the rough hands belonged to Esau. Still doubting, I asked, Are you truly Esau? I am, he swore. I ate, then pulled him close. Smelling Esau's clothes, my defenses crumbled. I surrendered the sacred blessing. May Elohim give you the earth's richness. Let nations serve you, and peoples bow to you. Be master over your brothers. Cursed be anyone who curses you. He left. Moments later, the real Esau walked in. Father, eat my game and bless me. My blood turned to ice. I shook violently. Who just brought me meat? I already blessed him, and that blessing cannot be undone. Esau wailed, a gut-wrenching cry. Bless me too! I was empty. I made him your master. What is left? He sobbed, and I spoke his exile. You will live by the sword. We all fight for who we are, don't we? Have you ever run from your own mistakes? I did. My brother's sorrow had curdled into dark, murderous rage. His vow haunted me. When our father dies, I will kill Jacob. Panicked, my mother delivered her desperate warning. Run to Haran, she begged. Hide with Laban until Esau's fury finally burns out. Why should I lose both my sons today? Then she wept over my exile. If I married a woman from this land, she told him, her life would mean nothing. Through my own deception, I had stolen the blessing, sparking an endless war between us. I fled Beersheba alone. I carried my father's heavy blessing, holding the ancient destiny first promised to Abraham. Completely alone on the road to Haran, I left my father's tents and Esau's boiling wrath behind. As the sun vanished, I collapsed in a barren wasteland. My only pillow was a jagged stone under the open sky. That night, I dreamed. A massive stairway rose from the dirt, piercing straight into heaven. Divine messengers moved endlessly up and down those steps, linking the physical world with the spiritual realm. At the very top of this ladder stood the Creator himself. His voice boomed, tying my fearful, uncertain steps to absolute divine truth. "I am the God of Abraham," he declared, "and the God of Isaac. This dirt beneath you belongs to you and your descendants. Your children will outnumber the dust, spreading across the earth in every direction. Through your bloodline, all families will find a blessing. Know this: I am with you. I will guard you wherever your exile leads, and I will bring you back home. I will never abandon you until every promise is fulfilled." I jolted awake, trembling violently. The Creator was in this desolate place, and I had been completely blind to it. Fear and absolute wonder flooded my chest. I had been sleeping right at heaven's front door. I named that barren ground Bethel. I took my stone pillow, stood it upright as a sacred pillar, and poured oil over it. I made a desperate vow. If the Almighty truly guards my lonely path, giving me bread and clothes, and brings me home in peace, then He is my God. This stone marker will become His house, and of everything He gives me, I will return a tenth. In that moment, a terrified fugitive transformed into a man with a vision. Out in the harsh wilderness, I did not find abandonment. I found presence. Not despair, but an eternal promise. That ladder proved earth and heaven were linked together. My exile was actually a sacred mission. Continuing eastward, I finally reached a well in Haran, where tired shepherds gathered to water their restless flocks. That is where I first saw Rachel, leading her father's sheep. Sudden strength surged through my veins. Single-handedly, I shoved the massive stone off the well to water her flock. Overwhelmed, I kissed her and wept. She meant family and future. Welcomed by her father Laban, I gladly offered 7 years of hard labor just to marry her. Love made the grueling work feel like nothing. The years passed like mere days. We celebrated the feast, but under the pitch-black night, Laban slipped Leah into my tent. When dawn broke, I realized the betrayal. My furious screams mirrored my own past lies. Laban just shrugged, claiming tradition demanded the older sister marry first. He offered Rachel too, but only if I slaved away another 7 years. I married both sisters, though my heart belonged entirely to Rachel. Seeing Leah unloved, the Almighty blessed her with children, while Rachel's arms remained empty. Leah birthed 4 strong sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. With every birth, Leah chose names filled with desperate longing, begging for my love. Finally, she stopped trying to win me and declared, "Now I will praise God." A bitter rivalry tore my home apart. I loved Rachel, but Leah had the children. Through all our painful striving and deep jealousy, the eternal house of Israel was quietly being forged. My tent became a war zone. Sound familiar? Rachel watched Leah's growing boys, consumed by envy. "Give me sons or I will die," she screamed at me. Crushed, I reminded her that only God creates life. Desperate, she gave me her servant, Bilhah. She birthed Dan and Naphtali, boys Rachel proudly paraded as victories over her sister. Refusing to lose, Leah offered her servant, Zilpah, who gave me Gad and Asher. My affection became a bitter contest of childbirth. One harvest, young Reuben found mandrakes, roots thought to boost fertility. Rachel wanted them. Bitterly, Leah spat back, "Was stealing my husband not enough? My wives traded me like property." I slept with Leah that night, bought by a handful of roots. That transaction gave us Issachar, Zebulun, and a daughter, Dinah. Leah walked proudly now, convinced her many children would finally force me to love her. At long last, heaven remembered my beloved Rachel. She bore a son, weeping that her deep shame was gone forever. She named him Joseph, praying for another boy to multiply her joy. With a massive family depending on me, I desperately needed a way to feed them all. Laban knew my divine blessing made him rich, so he tried to trap me there. Sick of being a servant, I hatched a plan. I claimed only the spotted and dark animals as my wage. Using peeled branches at the troughs, I selectively bred the absolute strongest sheep. Soon my own flocks exploded in numbers. The Almighty made me dangerously wealthy. My camps overflowed with children, massive herds, servants, and camels. But behind this perfect picture was a brutal reality of lies, rivalry, and human scheming, tangled up with God's grace. My 20 hard years with Laban didn't end in peace. They ended in suffocating tension. Laban's son started whispering that I stole their father's wealth. I saw the cold rage in Laban's eyes. Then, God spoke clearly. "Go back to your homeland. I will be with you." I pulled Rachel and Leah into the fields, reminding them how their father changed my wages 10 times, yet heaven had shielded me. Both sisters, bitter about being treated like property, told me they owed their father nothing. "Everything God took from him belongs to us and our kids," they said. "Do exactly what heaven told you." So, I loaded my family onto camels, gathered my massive flocks, and ran for Canaan. Without telling me, Rachel stole her father's sacred household idols. We fled in complete silence. When Laban realized we were gone, he hunted us for 7 exhausting days, trapping us in the hills of Gilead. But that night, the Almighty terrified Laban in a dream, warning him not to lay a single finger on me. Laban cornered me, screaming about stolen gods. Clueless about Rachel's theft, I boldly dared him to search everything. Rachel hid them under her saddle, faking illness, so he found nothing. Vindicated, my hidden rage exploded. I screamed about 20 years of brutal, freezing nights and blistering days, slaving like a dog for his wealth. If my father's God hadn't protected me, you would have left me completely ruined. Finally, Laban backed down. We forged a tense peace treaty, piling up heavy stones as a permanent witness. Laban stared at the rock pile and muttered, "May God keep watch between us when we are out of each other's sight." We swore sacred oaths, shared food, and slept on that cold hill. At dawn, Laban kissed his daughters goodbye and vanished. I stood there, finally breathing free air. Guided by Providence, I turned my face toward my true home. My homecoming was quickly swallowed by sheer panic. Scouts brought back nightmare news. Esau was marching toward me with 400 men. The memory of his violent rage paralyzed me. I frantically split my family into 2 camps. If Esau slaughters one, maybe the other can run. Then, I collapsed in desperate, broken prayer. "I am utterly unworthy of your mercy," I cried. "I crossed this river with nothing but a walking stick, and now I am a wealthy man. Please, save me from my brother's hands." Desperate to buy my survival, I gathered a massive peace offering for Esau. Hundreds of goats, camels, cows, and donkeys. I sent the animals ahead in waves, telling my servants to say, "This is a gift from Jacob. He is behind us." That midnight, I ushered my family across the dark river Jabbok. I stayed behind. Alone in the pitch blackness, I was suddenly attacked. A mysterious figure grabbed me, brutally wrestling me deep into the night. We violently fought until the stranger struck my hip, tearing it from the socket. Through blinding pain, I clung to him, gasping, "I won't let go until you bless me." He demanded my name. "Jacob," I choked out. Then he rewrote my destiny. "You are Israel. You wrestled God and survived." Shattered and bleeding, I shed my old self. I called the place Peniel, having survived the face of God. As the sun broke, I limped toward my new life, wounded but changed forever. Who are you wrestling with today? I am no longer a fugitive. I am Israel. Have you ever watched your past come to destroy you? I lifted my eyes, and there was Esau, marching with 400 men. The sheer terror nearly crushed me, but I had to move. I placed the maidservants and their kids first, then Leah's family, saving Rachel and Joseph for last. Then, I walked out in front of them all. Step by agonizing step, I walked toward my brother. I bowed to the dirt 7 times, completely surrendering my pride, until the gap between us vanished. But the bloodshed I expected never happened. Esau ran to me with his arms wide open. He pulled me close, fell on my neck, and kissed me. We both broke down, weeping for the stolen years, the deep wounds, and a healing I never thought possible. Esau looked past me at the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. I answered him softly, "The family God has graciously given your servant." One by one, the maidservants and their children stepped forward and bowed. Leah and her kids followed. Finally, my beloved Rachel and Joseph came near, bowing low to the earth. Then he asked about the massive herds of animals he had passed along the road. I told him, "To find favor in the eyes of my Lord." Esau just shook his head. "I have enough, my brother. Keep what is yours." But I pushed, desperate for his acceptance. "Please take my offering. The Creator has been so good to me, and I truly have everything I need." "Seeing your face right now is like seeing the face of God," I told him, "because you actually welcomed me." Finally, he accepted the gift. Esau wanted us to travel together to Seir, but I backed away, telling him the children and flocks were too fragile. He offered his armed men for protection, but I quietly turned him down. So Esau headed back toward Seir, while I turned my path toward Succoth. I built a home there and shelters for the livestock. Eventually, I made it safely to Shechem in Canaan, buying a plot of land from Hamar's sons for 100 pieces of silver. Right there on that soil, I built an altar. I called out to the God of Israel, the divine presence who kept me alive, healed my broken family, and gave me a new identity. But peace never lasts. My daughter Dinah went out to see the local women. Shechem, the local prince, saw her. He took her by force and violated her. Bizarrely, his heart became obsessed with her, and he tried to speak gently to her afterward. He even begged his father, "Get this girl for me. I want her as my wife." When I found out what he did to my little girl, I just froze. I kept entirely silent until my sons got back from the fields. Hamor came over wanting to make a business deal out of it. When my boys arrived and heard the news, they were shattered. Their grief turned into absolute burning rage. A horrific crime had been committed against our family. A line had been crossed. Hamor stood there pleading, "My son is desperate for your daughter. Let them marry. Let our families mix, trade daughters, live here, do business, take the land. Then Shechem himself had the nerve to speak. Just let me make this right. Name your price. Ask for any dowry or gift, and I will pay it. Just give me the girl. My sons replied, but their words were poison. They were plotting revenge for Dinah. Simeon and Levi, her own brothers, told them, we cannot give our sister to an uncircumcised man. That is a total disgrace. We will only agree if every single male among you undergoes circumcision. Do that, and we will mix our families and become one tribe. But if you refuse, they warned, we will take our sister and leave. Hamor and Shechem actually agreed on the spot. The young man didn't hesitate, completely blinded by his obsession with Dinah. They rallied their people at the city gates, saying, these men want peace. Let them stay. The land is huge. We get their daughters and their wealth becomes ours. We just have to do this one thing and be circumcised. Amazingly, all the men in the city went along with it. But on the third day, while they were all paralyzed in pain, my sons, Simeon and Levi, grabbed their swords. They ambushed the crippled city. They slaughtered every single male, killed Hamor and Shechem, and pulled Dinah out of that house. Then my other sons looted the ruins. Animals, riches, women, and children, they took everything. When I found out, I confronted Simeon and Levi. You have ruined me, I yelled. You have made us a target to everyone in Canaan. We are completely outnumbered. If they unite, our whole family is dead. But they just stared back with cold defiance. Should he treat our sister like a prostitute? Let's pause here together. Have you ever let vengeance poison your soul? The crime against my daughter was met with a massacre, dropping a massive burden of guilt right onto my shoulders. My spiritual map had to change. Then God spoke to me again. Get up, go to Bethel. Settle there and build an altar to the divine who saved you when you ran from Esau. Bethel, the place of my very first vision. That stairway reaching into the sky. Now God was calling me back, no longer a terrified runaway, but the broken leader of a scarred family. I pulled my household together. Get rid of all your foreign idols, I ordered them. Purify yourselves, change your clothes. We are marching to Bethel. I am building an altar to the God who answered my cries in the dark, the one who walked beside me. My family handed over every carved idol and amulet. I buried them all under a huge oak tree near Shechem, leaving our past in the dirt. As we traveled, a strange divine terror fell over the nearby towns. Nobody came after us. Once we hit Bethel, I built that altar. I named it El Bethel, honoring the exact spot God found me when I was running for my life. Soon after, my mother's old nurse, Deborah, died. We buried her under a tree I called the Oak of Weeping. In that heavy grief, God appeared to me again, locking in his ancient promise. You are no longer Jacob, but Israel. I am the Almighty. Grow and multiply. Whole nations will come from you. Kings will share your bloodline. The land I gave Abraham and Isaac now belongs to you and your descendants. When the divine presence lifted, I set up a stone monument, poured out a drink offering, and covered it in oil, marking Bethel forever. We packed up and moved toward Ephrath. But on the road, my beautiful Rachel went into sudden agonizing labor. The midwife tried to comfort her. Don't panic, you have another boy. But she was fading. With her last breath, she named him Benoni, son of my sorrow. I couldn't accept that, so I called him Benjamin, son of my right hand. My Rachel died there. I buried her on the road to Bethlehem, placing a pillar over the grave of my greatest love. I kept moving, completely numb, pitching my tent past Migdal-eder. Then a new nightmare hit. My oldest son Reuben slept with Bilhah, my concubine. When I found out, the betrayal suffocated our entire family. The tally of my sons was finally set. 6 from Leah: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. 2 from Rachel: Joseph and Benjamin. 2 from Bilhah: Dan and Naphtali. And 2 from Zilpah: Gad and Asher. 12 boys in total, the messy foundation of Israel's tribes. I finally made it to Hebron, back to my father Isaac, to the ancient lands of Abraham. My father lived to be 180. At last, he breathed his final breath and joined our ancestors, totally full of days. Esau and I stood shoulder to shoulder and buried him. We closed out a generation, carrying the ancient promise forward. But my story is only part of the map. Let's look at my brother Esau, the father of Edom. His bloodline didn't carry our main covenant, but his legacy forged powerful kingdoms. His descendants became our close neighbors, our fiercest rivals, and our enemies. Esau took Canaanite wives, starting with Adah the Hittite. Then came Oholibamah the Horite, and Basemath from the line of Ishmael. These women gave him strong sons: Eliphaz, Ruel, Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. All of them born right there in Canaan. But just like back in the days of Abraham and Lot, Esau and I simply had too much wealth. We could not survive on the same patch of dirt. Our massive herds choked the land. So my brother walked away, settling deep in the rugged hills of Seir. From that day on, Esau was Edom. His family tree exploded into complex layers of sons, grandsons, and tribal chiefs. His firstborn, Eliphaz, produced a line of fierce leaders: Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. And through a concubine named Timnah came Amalek, a name that would haunt us forever. Ruel gave him Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. Oholibamah's sons, Jeush, Jalam, and Korah, also became powerful warlords, ruling their own wild territories. They absorbed the native Horite tribes of the land, ancient desert survivors like Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anna, Dishan, Ezer, and Dishan. Those ancient desert clans merged, becoming the roots of entirely new nations. The native chiefs ruled until Esau's bloodline completely dominated the territory. Believe it or not, my brother's family crowned actual kings long before Israel ever had one. Men of power like Bela, Jobab, and Husham. Vicious warriors like Hadad, who slaughtered Midianites on the plains of Moab. Leaders like Samlah, Saul from the riverlands, Baal-Hanan, and another Hadad who ruled from the city of Pau. What does this mean for you and I today? It shows Edom building an empire while my family was just wandering, broken, but promised. Esau got power. I got the struggle. I trace my uncle Esau's lineage: Timnah, Alva, Jetheth, Oholibamah, Elah, Pinyon, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzar, Magdio, and Aram. They forged the nation of Edom. A brother exiled from my father Jacob's covenant, yet remembered as a kingdom of leaders and kings. They stood as our neighbors and bitter rivals. A haunting reminder of the deep family division bleeding from our shared patriarchal roots. Today, you and I are going to unpack this ancient map together. My father Jacob settled in Canaan. At 17, I felt painfully different. I worked the flocks with my half-brothers, but I reported their dark deeds back home. Worse still, my father openly loved me most. He gave me a vibrant, ornamented coat, painting a target on my back. That favoritism ignited pure hatred. My brothers couldn't even look at me. Then, the dreams started. I saw sheaves of grain, their sheaves bowing to mine. Their resentment boiled over. Then another vision. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing to me. Even my father snapped, "Will we all bow to you?" Yet he quietly waited. My brothers just burned with rage. He sent me from Hebron to find them near Shechem. I tracked them to Dothan. They spotted me from afar. Bitterness turned lethal. Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him, toss him in a pit, and blame some wild beast. We'll see about his dreams. Reuben panicked. "Don't shed blood. Throw him in this cistern," he pleaded, secretly planning to rescue me. I arrived, and they violently ripped off my coat, tossing me into the dark pit. Then they sat to eat. An Ishmaelite caravan appeared. Judah spoke up. "Why kill him? Let's just sell him. He's still our blood." They agreed. I was dragged from the dirt and sold for 20 silver shekels. Just like that, Midianite traders hauled me off toward Egypt. When Reuben found the pit empty, he tore his clothes in absolute grief. The others drenched my beloved coat in goat's blood and handed it to our father. He recognized it immediately. "My son's coat! A beast tore him to pieces!" My father ripped his clothes, collapsing into endless, inconsolable mourning, vowing to take his sorrow to the grave. Meanwhile, my world vanished. I was auctioned in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's captain of the guard. My life felt shattered, yet Yahweh was secretly charting my path. While I suffered, my brother Judah left the family. He settled near an Adullamite named Hira, marrying a Canaanite woman. She gave him 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. Judah found a wife named Tamar for his firstborn, But was evil, and Yahweh struck him down. Judah ordered his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar and raise an heir for his brother. Onan refused to give his brother a legacy, spilling his seed on the ground instead. This angered Yahweh, who took Onan's life too. Terrified of losing his last son, Shelah, Judah lied. He told Tamar to wait as a widow until Shelah grew up, never intending to follow through. Tamar waited. Years passed, and Judah's own wife died. After mourning, Judah went shearing in Timnah with his friend Hira. Tamar realized she'd been abandoned. Shelah was grown, but withheld. She ditched her widow's clothes, wrapped herself in a veil, and sat along the Enaim road. Judah walked right by, mistaking his own daughter-in-law for a streetwalker. He promised her a goat as payment. Tamar demanded his seal, cord, and staff as collateral. He surrendered them, and she conceived. Later, Judah sent Hira to pay her, but the locals swore no prostitute was there. Embarrassed, Judah simply let the matter drop. 3 months later, Judah heard Tamar was pregnant from prostitution. Enraged, he ordered her burned. As they dragged her out, she sent him a message. "The owner of these got me pregnant. Recognize your seal, cord, and staff." Judah froze, acknowledging them. "She's more righteous than I," he confessed, "for I withheld my son." He never touched her again. Tamar birthed twins. One baby reached out, receiving a scarlet thread, but he pulled back and his brother burst out instead. "What a breach!" the midwife gasped. They named him Perez. Then came the brother with the thread, Zerah. Tamar's bold defiance saved Judah's royal bloodline. Meanwhile, walk with me into the dark. My nightmare was starting. I was trapped in Egypt, a slave in Potiphar's house. I was ripped from my family, betrayed and utterly alone. Yet Yahweh never abandoned me. Somehow, everything I touched began to thrive. Potiphar noticed God's favor on me. He handed me the keys to his entire estate. Yahweh blessed his house and fields just because I was there. Soon, my master didn't worry about a single thing except what he ate for dinner. I was young, strong, and soon, Potiphar's wife locked her eyes on me. "Lie with me," she demanded. I backed away. My master trusts me with everything. He kept nothing from me except you, his wife. How could I commit such evil and sin against Elohim? She relentlessly pressured me daily, but I refused to even be near her. One afternoon, I walked into an empty house. She grabbed my cloak, screaming, "Lie with me!" Panic hit. I tore myself free, abandoned my coat, and bolted out the door. Humiliated, she called the servants and weaponized my identity. "Look, he brought a Hebrew here to mock us. He tried to force himself on me, but I screamed, and he ran, leaving his coat." She kept my garment like a trophy until Potiphar returned. She spun her lie. "That Hebrew slave tried to disgrace me." I screamed, and he ran without his coat. Potiphar exploded. He threw me straight into the royal dungeon. But even in that cold darkness, Yahweh showed up. He granted me favor with the warden. Soon, I was managing the whole prison, completely trusted. Whatever I touched, God blessed. Falsely accused, stripped of my name again, I survived because Yahweh was silently carving my path. During my exile, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and baker angered the king of Egypt. The furious Pharaoh threw them right into my dungeon. The captain ordered me to serve them. So there I was, a forgotten slave, waiting hand and foot on high-ranking royal officials in the darkness. One night, they both had deeply disturbing dreams. The next morning, I noticed their pale, troubled faces. "Why look so bleak today?" I asked. "We had dreams," they muttered, "but there's no one to interpret them." I felt a sudden clarity, entirely from Yahweh. Doesn't Elohim hold all interpretations? "Tell me," I urged. The cupbearer spoke up. "I saw a vine with 3 branches. It bloomed into ripe grapes. I held Pharaoh's cup, squeezed the grapes into it, and handed it to the king." "Here is the meaning," I smiled. "The branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore your position. You'll serve him just like before. But please, remember me. Show some mercy. Tell Pharaoh about me, and get me out of this hell. I was kidnapped from the Hebrew land, and I've done absolutely nothing to deserve this miserable dungeon." The baker eagerly spoke next. 3 pastry baskets were on my head. Birds ate Pharaoh's food from the top. I looked at him, knowing our ancient fears are still your fears today. "Here is the meaning. The 3 baskets are 3 days," I told him. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head right off your shoulders. He will hang you, and the birds will tear at your flesh." And it happened exactly that way. On his birthday, Pharaoh threw a massive feast. The cupbearer got his old job back, but the baker was executed, just like I warned them from that dark cell. But the cupbearer forgot me completely. I was left to rot in my loneliness. You and I both know what it feels like to wait on broken promises, right? Yet even in that crushing silence, the divine hand was moving. 2 agonizing years dragged by in that dark cell. Then the king of Egypt had a vision. In his sleep, Pharaoh stood on the muddy banks of the Great Nile. 7 cows crawled out of the dark water. Beautiful, sleek, heavy with fat, grazing peacefully in the thick reeds. But then, right behind them, 7 more dragged themselves onto the shore. They were hideous, starved, nothing but sharp bones and hollow sides. The monstrous, rotting cows stood next to the healthy ones. Then, in a flash of horror, the starving beasts swallowed the fat ones whole. But swallowing them changed nothing. They were just as wretched and empty as before. Pharaoh jolted awake, terrified. When exhaustion pulled him back under, the nightmare returned. He saw 7 ears of grain on a single stalk, golden and heavy. Then 7 sick, withered ears sprouted, scorched by the desert wind. And just like the beasts, the dead wheat devoured the good. The king woke up, gasping. By sunrise, his mind was unraveling. He dragged in every priest, every mystic, and every brilliant mind in the Egyptian empire. He told them the nightmares, but they just stared back, completely clueless. That was the exact moment the cupbearer finally remembered my name, admitting his terrible guilt. "Today I remember my sins," he said. "When you were furious with us, you locked me and the baker in the captain's dungeon. One night, we both had bizarre dreams. There was a young Hebrew slave down there with us, working for the captain. We explained our visions to him, and he told us exactly what our nightmares meant, piece by piece. And every single word that boy predicted came true. I lived. The baker hung. Suddenly, guards yanked me from the dungeon. My heart pounded as I stripped off the filth of my prison years. I shaved my face, put on clean clothes, and was marched straight into the royal court. The king looked down at me. "I had a dream," he said. "Nobody can decode it. They tell me you can crack any vision you hear." I stood my ground, stripped of my old pride. "I cannot do this," I told him quietly. "But God will give you the answer you need." Pharaoh leaned forward, eyes dark with fear. I was standing on the riverbank. 7 healthy, beautiful cows came up and started eating the reeds. But then, 7 vile, skeletal beasts crawled out right behind them. "I have never seen anything so grotesque in my entire life," he whispered. "Those starving animals devoured the fat ones whole. But here is the horror. You couldn't even tell they had eaten. They were just as empty and wretched as before." I woke up shaking. When I slept again, I saw 7 golden ears of grain growing on a single stalk. Then 7 dead, wind-blasted ears grew up and choked the life out of the healthy ones. I asked my experts, but their silence is deafening. I looked at this powerful ruler, knowing exactly what was coming. "Your dreams are the same," I explained. "God is warning you about what happens next. The 7 fat cows and the 7 full ears mean the exact same thing. They are 7 years. It is one unified message. Those ugly, starving beasts and the scorched, dead wheat represent 7 long years of brutal famine. I am telling you the absolute truth. The divine is pulling back the curtain to show you what comes next. Listen to me carefully. 7 years of unbelievable wealth and massive harvests are about to sweep across this entire empire. But right after that, 7 years of starvation will hit. The hunger will be so devastating that people will forget the good times ever existed. It will completely consume everything. The fact that this nightmare struck you twice means the plan is permanently locked in by God. It is already in motion, and it is going to happen fast. You need to be ready. So here is what you must do. Find a man who is brilliant and deeply wise, and put him in charge of the country. Set up managers everywhere to tax 1/5 of the harvest during the boom years. You have to hoard the excess food from the good times. Lock the grain down under your absolute control, filling up the massive royal silos. Store that food inside the cities and guard it with your life. This stockpile is the only thing that will keep the nation from being wiped off the map when the Great Starvation hits. The whole court went completely silent. Then, Pharaoh and his elite ministers nodded. The king looked around at his people and asked, "Could we possibly find anyone better than this man, filled with the divine spirit?" Then, he locked eyes with me. "Since God gave you this vision," he declared, "no one is as wise as you are. You are now the master of my estate. My entire kingdom will obey your every command. The only thing keeping me above you is this throne." He stepped closer. "Right now, I am handing you the entire empire." He pulled the royal signet ring right off his finger and shoved it onto mine. They dressed me in pure linen, wrapping a heavy gold chain around my neck. Suddenly, I was riding in the king's second chariot. Guards screamed for the crowds to bow as I passed. In an instant, the forgotten prisoner became the ruler of everything. The king spoke again. "I am Pharaoh, but without your permission, no one will move." He gave me a new Egyptian name and a high priest's daughter, 30 years old. I had survived the dark cell to stand beside the king. Have you ever felt the pressure of wearing a mask just to survive? My new identity was forged, but my true work was just beginning. Just as I saw it, the earth exploded with life. For 7 years, the harvests were staggering. I drove myself relentlessly, pulling every ounce of surplus from the fields and packing it tight inside the city walls. I stockpiled so much grain, it looked like the sand on the beach. Eventually, I just stopped tracking the numbers. There was simply too much to count. Before the dark days hit, my wife gave me 2 sons. I held my firstborn and named him Manasseh, meaning forgetfulness, because God finally gave me peace for my trauma and my broken family. I called the second boy Ephraim, meaning twice fruitful. I was thriving right here, trapped in the very place of my deepest exile. Then, the golden years slammed shut. The 7 years of horror began, exactly as the vision warned. Mass starvation ripped through the surrounding nations, but inside my borders, we had food. When the panic finally hit our streets and the crowds begged the king for bread, he just pointed at me. "Go to him," he commanded them. "Do whatever he tells you to do." I unlocked the massive silos. I started rationing out survival to the people as the hunger clawed deeper into the dirt. The death grip was global now. Desperate families from every corner of the earth dragged themselves to me, begging to buy food. The supply chains were dead. And back in my childhood home, the land of Canaan was suffocating under the weight of it. Far away, my father realized we had the only stockpiles left. I could almost hear him yelling at my brothers. "Why are you just standing around staring at each other? I heard there are rations down south. Get moving. Buy what we need so we do not starve to death." And just like that, the 10 men who threw me away marched toward my kingdom. But the old man kept Benjamin, my one full brother, hidden at home. He was terrified of losing his favorite, just like he lost me. So my brothers blended in with the massive crowds of refugees pouring across the borders to escape the famine. And sitting on the governor's throne, controlling who lived and who died, was the boy they betrayed. They walked right up to my throne and dropped their faces to the dirt. My heart stopped. I knew those faces instantly. But behind my royal robes and Egyptian makeup, they saw a stranger. I buried my emotions and barked at them like a tyrant. "Where are you from?" I snapped. "Canaan," they mumbled. "Here to buy food." The childhood dreams flooded my mind. I looked at my abusers and hissed, "You are spies." "You came to expose our weak spots," I accused them. They panicked. "No, my lord, we just want to buy rations. We are honest men, all sons of the same father. We would never run espionage against you." I kept the pressure on. "Lies. You are here to scout our vulnerabilities." Trembling, they cracked open their family secrets. "We were 12 boys once, born to one man in Canaan. The youngest stayed with our father, and one, he is gone forever." Hearing them say I was dead made my blood run cold. "Exactly what a spy would say," I fired back. "Here is your test. As surely as the king breathes, you are not leaving until I see this youngest brother. Send one man to get him. The rest of you will rot in chains. We are going to find out if you actually know what truth is. If you fail, you die as enemies." And with that command, I threw my own flesh and blood into a dark, suffocating cell for 3 brutal days. On the 3rd morning, I offered a sliver of grace. "Do this and live," I told them, "because I fear God." The trauma of my past was finally colliding with my present. Maybe you are standing in that exact same place today, waiting to see if your own broken history can be redeemed. They had to bring my youngest brother back to prove they had changed. Terrified, they agreed. Have you ever felt your darkest sin finally catch up to you? We stared at each other, the horrifying truth settling in. We were guilty. Decades ago, we watched our brother beg for his life, and we ignored his cries. Now that same terror was choking us. Reuben snapped at us. "Didn't I warn you not to harm the boy? You refused to listen. Now his blood is on our hands." We had no idea the terrifying Egyptian ruler understood every word. He used an interpreter to hide his identity. Suddenly he turned away, maybe to hide his tears. But when he came back, his face was stone. He tore Simeon away, binding him right in front of us. Then, the ruler ordered his guards to fill our bags with grain, secretly hiding our money inside, and gave us travel supplies. His silent orders were carried out perfectly. We loaded our exhausted animals and fled. But that night at the camp, one of us opened a bag for feed and froze. The silver was sitting right there at the top. "My money is back," he whispered, holding it out. "It is right here in my bag." My stomach dropped. We started shaking, looking at the dark sky, wondering, what is God doing to us? Arriving back in Canaan, we faced our frail father pouring out the nightmare. "The ruler of that place was brutal," I explained. "He treated us like foreign spies." We told him, "We are honest men, not spies. We were 12 brothers from one father. One is dead, and the youngest stayed home in Canaan." But the harsh Lord demanded proof. He ordered us to leave one brother behind in his dark prisons. He said to take our grain and go, but warned us to bring our youngest brother back to him. Only then would he believe we were honest men. "Only then will I free your brother and let you trade here." But as we emptied the rest of our bags, we found every single silver bundle inside. Seeing that cursed silver, pure terror washed over me and my father. Jacob cried out, "You are robbing me of my children! Joseph is dead, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is working against me." Desperate, Reuben begged him, You can kill my own 2 sons if I do not bring the boy back safely to you. Trust him to me, and I will return him. But my father refused. My son is not going with you. His brother is already dead. He is all I have left. If any harm comes to him on this road, you will send my old gray head into the grave in pure agony. We stood there defeated. Our father clung to Benjamin, while starvation slowly strangled our homeland. The drought was crushing us. When we finally ate the very last of the Egyptian grain, my father looked at us, desperate. Go back. Buy us a little food. I stepped forward and looked him in the eye. That powerful ruler gave us a strict warning. He said we would never see his face again unless our youngest brother came along. If you send the boy, we will gladly buy food. But if you keep him here, we cannot go. The man swore we would not even get an audience without him. My father wept, asking why we brought such disaster upon him by even mentioning we had another brother. I told him, the ruler interrogated us about our entire family history. He asked if you were alive, and if we had another sibling. We simply answered him honestly. How could we possibly predict he would demand to see him? I begged my father one last time. Send the boy with me. We have to go now, so our children survive this. I will personally guarantee his safety. Hold me completely responsible. If I fail to bring him back and stand him right here, I will carry the guilt forever. Honestly, if we hadn't wasted so much time, we could have made this trip twice by now. Finally, broken and exhausted, my father agreed. If it has to be this way, take the best products we have left, balm, honey, rare spices, and almonds, as a peace offering. Pack double the silver for the trip. Take back the silver you found in your bags, too. Maybe it was just an honest mistake. Take your brother and go back to face this man. May God grant you mercy so he releases Simeon and Benjamin. He looked away, whispering, If I lose my children, I lose everything. So, carrying the heavy gifts, extra silver, and young Benjamin, we marched back to Egypt to face our judge. The moment the Egyptian ruler spotted Benjamin with us, he pulled his steward aside. Bring these men into my private home. Prepare a feast. They are eating with me at noon. We had no idea what was happening. His servant simply grabbed us and dragged us inside. You and I know that feeling when a trap finally snaps shut. My blood ran cold. I whispered to the others, It's because of the silver. He's going to ambush us, steal our animals, and enslave us all. Panicking, we stopped the steward right at the massive doorways, pleading, Sir, please, we only came here the first time to buy grain. When we reached our camp and opened our bags, every single piece of silver was sitting right there. We brought all of it back to you, down to the last ounce. We brought fresh money to buy more food, too. We swear we have no idea who planted that silver. The steward smiled strangely. Relax, do not panic. Your God must have hidden treasure in your bags. I got your payment. Then he led Simeon out of the dark cells to join us. He brought us deep into the ruler's estate, offering water to wash the desert from our tired feet. He even brought feed for our donkeys. We nervously arranged our humble gifts, waiting for the powerful Lord to arrive at noon. The second he walked in, we handed over our offerings and fell completely flat on the stone floor. He asked how we were doing, his voice strangely soft. Is your old father well? The one you mentioned. Is he still alive? We kept our heads down. Yes, he is well. He is still alive. We bowed even lower into the dust. The ruler looked up, and his eyes locked on to young Benjamin. Is this the youngest brother you told me about? he asked. "May God be gracious to you, my son." Suddenly, the fierce ruler spun around and rushed out of the grand room. We didn't know his heart was breaking, desperate for a place to cry. He locked himself in his private room and broke down. Minutes later, he returned, face washed, wearing a cold mask again. "Serve the food," he commanded. They seated him alone, the Egyptians alone, and us alone, because eating with Hebrews was completely forbidden and disgusting to their culture. As we sat, we realized we were arranged in exact order, from the oldest to the very youngest. I stared at my brothers, completely terrified and amazed. He sent food to us directly from his royal table. Strangely, he gave Benjamin 5 times more than anyone else. Still, we ate and finally drank freely together. We didn't know it, but this hidden lord was setting his final psychological trap. He secretly pulled his steward aside. "Pack their bags with as much food as possible. Put their silver right back at the top, but in the youngest boy's bag, bury my personal silver drinking cup right next to his money." The loyal steward followed the terrifying order perfectly. As the sun rose, we were sent out of the city, feeling like free men. We barely made it past the city limits before the trap sprang. The ruler ordered his guards to hunt us down. "Ask them why they repaid my kindness with such betrayal. Ask them why they stole my sacred silver cup." The horses caught up to us in a cloud of dust, and the steward screamed those exact accusations right in our faces. I felt physically sick. We stared at him, horrified. "Why are you saying this?" I yelled. "We would never do something like that. Look, we brought back the silver we found the first time, all the way from Canaan. Why on earth would we steal from your master's house?" "If you find that cup on any of us, kill him, and the rest of us will gladly become your slaves." The steward narrowed his eyes. "Fine, but only the thief becomes my slave. The rest of you can walk away free." My hands were shaking as we ripped our heavy grain bags off the animals and threw them open. He dug through our bags, starting with the oldest, and then he found it, the silver cup, deep inside Benjamin's bag. I screamed, ripping my clothes apart in pure agony. Our darkest sin had finally caught us. Numb, we packed the animals and marched back to our doom. The ruler was waiting for us at his house. We collapsed onto the cold floor. He glared at us. "What have you done? Did you really think you could hide from a man like me?" What do you and I do when God finally exposes our deepest guilt? I looked up, totally broken. What can we even say to you? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered our past sins. We are all your slaves now, every single one of us. But the ruler shook his head. "No, only the boy who stole the cup stays as my slave. The rest of you can go home in peace." I couldn't let that happen. I crawled closer to him, begging with everything I had. "My Lord, please, let me speak one word to you. Do not let your fire burn against me, for you are as powerful as Pharaoh. You asked us before if we had a father or another brother. We told you we have an old father and a young son born in his twilight years. The boy's brother is dead. He is the only one left from his mother, and his father loves him deeply. But you commanded us to bring him down here so you could see him with your own eyes." I stood before the powerful Egyptian, begging for my brother Benjamin's life. "He cannot leave his father," I pleaded. "If he does, the old man will die." But this ruler had warned us, return without the youngest and face ruin. When we'd brought those crushing words home, my father broke. Starvation eventually forced his hand. "Go back," he whispered. "Buy us a little food." "We can't go down there without him," I told my father. "That ruler won't even look at us." My father's eyes were hollow with ancient grief. He looked at me, a man burdened by guilt. "My wife gave me 2 sons," he wept. "One left me long ago, torn to pieces by wild beasts. I've never seen him since." If only he knew the dark truth. "Take this one too," my father sobbed. "And if harm finds him, my gray hairs will go down to the grave in absolute agony." I repeated this memory to the Egyptian lord, my voice shaking. "If I return home without the boy, my father will literally drop dead. His soul is tethered to this child. We will be the ones pushing our father into an early, sorrowful grave." I had sworn an oath to my father, trading my life for Benjamin's. If I failed to bring him back, I carry that sin forever, I had promised. So I threw myself at the ruler's feet. "Take me," I begged. "Let me stay here as your slave instead of the boy. Let him go home. How can I possibly face my father if his favorite son is gone? I cannot watch that grief destroy my father." Suddenly, the Egyptian lord cracked. The mask slipped. A lifetime of isolation, buried secrets, and unspoken trauma shattered all at once right in front of us. He roared out, his heavy voice echoing through the massive stone hall. "Get everyone out of here right now!" The royal guards scrambled away terrified. Suddenly, we were completely alone with this immensely powerful stranger. Then, he broke down. A wail so loud, so full of ancient pain, it pierced the palace walls. The entire royal court heard him sobbing. We stood frozen, totally trapped in the terrifying echo of his grief. He turned to us and spoke the words that shattered our reality. "I am Joseph. Is my father truly alive?" We were paralyzed. My throat closed. We couldn't speak a single word. Sheer panic gripped my chest. My mind raced. This was the brother we betrayed. He waved us closer. "Please, step forward," he urged. We inched toward him, shaking with absolute terror. "I am Joseph," he whispered, "the brother you sold to Egypt. But listen, do not be consumed by guilt over what you did. God sent me ahead of you to save us all. This brutal famine has cursed the land for 2 years, and 5 more are coming. No plowing, no harvest. But divine providence placed me here to ensure our survival, to pull you from the ashes. You didn't send me into exile. God did. He made me a father to the Pharaoh himself, master of this palace, ruler of all Egypt." His eyes welled up again, not with anger, but with impossible forgiveness. "Hurry," he pleaded. "Go to my father. Tell him his son Joseph says, 'God has given me this empire.' Tell him to come down here immediately. You will all live in the region of Goshen, close to me. You, your children, your grandchildren too, your flocks, and every single thing you own. I will protect you there. 5 more years of death are coming, and I refuse to let your families starve into dust. Look at me. Benjamin, look at me. You can see with your own eyes that it's really me speaking. Go tell our father about my power here. Tell him everything you've witnessed. Hurry, bring my father down here." He couldn't hold back anymore. He threw his arms around Benjamin, his full brother, sobbing violently into his shoulder. And Benjamin held him, crying right back. Then he grabbed us, kissing the very men who betrayed him, weeping over us until the ice in my chest finally melted. Slowly, we found the courage to speak. The news of our reunion echoed through the palace. Pharaoh himself heard the rumor and was thrilled. He told Joseph, "Tell your brothers to pack their animals, ride back to Canaan, and bring everyone to me. I'll give them the finest territory in Egypt," Pharaoh promised. "Take my royal wagons for your wives and little ones. Don't worry about leaving your old stuff behind. The absolute best of my kingdom is yours." We were stunned by the grace. We did exactly as told. Joseph handed over the carts and enough supplies to cross the desert. He handed each of us fresh clothes. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 silver pieces and 5 massive wardrobes. For our father, he loaded 10 donkeys with Egypt's finest treasures, plus 10 more packed with grain and bread for the road. As he finally sent us off, his parting words cut deep. "Don't fight among yourselves on the way home." We dragged ourselves back to Canaan, back to the father we had lied to for years. "Joseph is alive," we confessed. "He rules the entire Egyptian empire." The old man stared at us, numb, his heart refusing to accept the shock. But as we poured out Joseph's words and he saw the royal wagons, my father's dead spirit slowly flickered back to life. "Enough," he gasped. "My boy is still out there. I have to see him before I take my last breath." So driven by desperate hope, the frail patriarch packed up his entire existence, and we began the haunting journey out of the promised land. Stopping at Beersheba, my father offered sacrifices, terrified of leaving the land God promised us. That night, God pierced his darkness through a vision. "Jacob, Jacob," the voice called. "I am here," my father whispered. The divine reply offered the ultimate anchor. "I am the God of your father. Do not be terrified of Egypt. I will forge your family into a massive nation there. I am walking down into the exile with you. I will bring your people back, and Joseph himself will close your eyes when you pass." Fortified by that supernatural promise, we loaded our elderly father, our wives, and our kids into the Egyptian carts. We drove our livestock and dragged everything we owned out of Canaan. Leaving behind our identity, we descended into the great unknown empire. Our whole tribe marched into the dust, sons, daughters, every breathing soul of our clan. Let's trace the bloodline that walked into that furnace. From Leah came Reuben, my oldest brother, along with his boys, Hanak, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. Then came Simeon's line: Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, born of a Canaanite mother. Levi brought Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Then my own sons, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah, since I had already buried and Onan back in Canaan. From Perez came Hezron and Hamul. Issachar brought Tola, Puvah, Job, and Shimron. Zebulun walked with Sered, Elon, and Jaleel. Leah's side, including our sister Dinah, totaled 33 fragile souls. From Zilpah's bloodline came Gad and his boys, Ziphion, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. Then Asher, his daughter Sarah, and sons Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beriah. Beriah's sons, Heber and Malchiel, pushed Zilpah's count to 16. Then there was Rachel, my father's greatest love. Her legacy? Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph already had Manasseh and Ephraim, born in exile from an Egyptian priest's daughter. Benjamin arrived with 10 sons of his own. Rachel's line stood at 14 total. Finally, from Bilhah came Dan with Hushim, plus Naphtali and his 4 boys. Just 7 souls from her side. So our bloodline crossing into Egypt, minus our wives, counted 66 survivors. Add Joseph's family already there, and we numbered exactly 70. The entire seed of Israel. My father chose me to ride ahead to Joseph and secure our path into Goshen. When we finally rolled in, my brother fired up his royal chariot and rode out to meet him. The moment he saw him, the ruler of Egypt collapsed onto the old man's neck, weeping relentlessly. My father, completely overwhelmed but finally at peace, whispered, "Now I am ready to die. I've seen your face. I know my boy lived." Afterward, Joseph turned to us. He explained he had to officially inform Pharaoh we had arrived from Canaan. He told us to identify as lifelong shepherds, bringing our vast herds and everything we owned. "Listen closely," he warned us. "When Pharaoh asks what you do, tell him you raise livestock. It's the only way he'll isolate us in Goshen. To the Egyptians, shepherds are absolutely disgusting. We need that distance." So, guided by a dark past and God's sovereign hand, we walked into the belly of Egypt. You and I both know exile changes a person. Here, our people would be tested, broken, and eventually multiplied, fulfilling an ancient promise. Joseph stood before Pharaoh, announcing that our father and our herds had officially crossed over from Canaan and settled in Goshen. He pulled 5 of us aside to stand directly in front of the king. We were terrified. Just as predicted, Pharaoh asked what we did for a living. "We are shepherds," we replied, "just like our ancestors." We pleaded for sanctuary in Goshen. The starvation in Canaan was ruthless, and there wasn't a blade of grass left for our animals. Pharaoh looked down at us, then turned to his favorite advisor. "The whole country is yours," he told my brother. "Settle them in the absolute best territory. Give them Goshen." He even offered us jobs managing his royal herds. We came as guilty refugees, but we were handed a kingdom. I watched Joseph lead our father Jacob before Pharaoh. My father, small and frail, raised his hands to bless the ruler of this foreign world. When asked his age, my father spoke of 130 years, a bitter, wandering existence, falling short of our ancestors' ancient glory. With another blessing, he turned and left the throne room. Joseph handed me and my family the richest soil in all of Egypt. We settled in Ramses, exactly as Pharaoh ordered. Joseph kept me, my father, and our hungry children alive with daily bread. But outside our doors, the famine was a beast devouring Egypt and Canaan. People withered away in absolute despair. I watched my brother gather every silver coin in the land, trading life-saving grain for Pharaoh's overflowing treasury. When the silver vanished, the starving Egyptians begged for bread. I saw Joseph trade them grain for their herds, horses, sheep, cattle, and donkeys. We survived another year, but then they returned, hollow-eyed. They confessed their money and beasts were gone. Only their bodies and barren fields remained. They begged my brother to buy their very flesh for food, terrified of dying. I stood by as Joseph bought every inch of Egypt's soil for Pharaoh. Broken by hunger, men surrendered their fields. The land became royal property, and the masses were herded into crowded cities across the empire. Only the temple priests kept their holy ground, surviving on a daily ration from the crown, untouchable by my brother's vast authority. I heard Joseph tell the broken masses, "I have purchased you and your land for Pharaoh. Take this seed and plant the earth. When harvest comes, you must surrender a fifth to the king. Keep 4 parts for yourselves, to replant, to eat, and to save your starving children." The people wept with gratitude, crying, "You saved our lives. Let us find favor in your eyes, and we will serve Pharaoh." I watched my brother carve this law into Egypt's history. A 20% tax forever, sparing only the sacred lands of the priests, which never fell under Pharaoh's absolute control. My family thrived in Goshen, securing land, multiplying, and finding strange comfort. My father lived in this foreign exile for 17 years, reaching 147. Sensing his death approaching, he summoned Joseph. I watched him force my brother to swear a sacred oath, hand under thigh. He begged not to be buried in Egyptian soil, but to rest with our ancient fathers. Joseph swore it, and my frail father bowed upon his bed in deep worship, clinging to the faith that God's ancient promise still held true. When word reached Joseph that our father was fading, he rushed to his bedside, bringing his 2 Egyptian-born sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. I saw my father force himself upright. He whispered of the Almighty appearing to him in Canaan, blessing him with a promise, a future of countless descendants, mighty nations, and an eternal homeland for our bloodline. He declared that Joseph's boys, born in this alien land, were now his own, equal to me and my brothers. Any future sons would remain Joseph's, sharing their brother's inheritance. Then his voice cracked. He spoke of Rachel, his great love, dying on the dusty road to Bethlehem, buried far from home. My father squinted at the 2 young men, asking who they were. Joseph answered that God gave him these sons in exile. My father demanded they come close for a final blessing. His ancient eyes were failing, but he held them tight, weeping because he never thought he would see Joseph again, let alone his children. Joseph bowed to the floor, then carefully positioned the boys. He steered Manasseh toward my father's right hand and Ephraim to the left, ensuring the firstborn received the supreme blessing. But my father deliberately crossed his frail arms. He forced his right hand onto the younger boy, Ephraim. He began to bless Joseph, crying out to the very God our ancestors Abraham and Isaac had faithfully followed. The divine shepherd who had guided his entire life, the angel who had rescued him from absolute darkness. He prayed our ancient names would live on through these boys, multiplying wildly across the earth. I watched Joseph tense up, openly displeased that his father favored the younger son. He tried lifting the old man's right hand back to Manasseh, the rightful heir. But my stubborn father refused. He swore both boys would be mighty, but the younger brother would rise higher, birthing an unstoppable multitude of nations. So he elevated Ephraim over the firstborn. I heard him establish a blessing for all our future generations. May God make you just like Ephraim and Manasseh. Then my father looked at Joseph, whispering that his death was near, but God would guide us back to our ancestral homeland. He gave Joseph an extra slice of inheritance above us, a rugged mountain ridge he had conquered from the Amorites with his own sword. As the shadow of death fell over him, my father called us all to his bedside. He demanded we gather to hear the dark and glorious future waiting for us. His trembling voice held the heavy warmth of a blessing, but also the cutting edge of sheer judgment and ancient prophecy. I stood frozen as he looked at Reuben, his firstborn. He recalled Reuben's early strength, the pride that should have been his birthright. But his tone turned bitter, because Reuben was reckless as wild water, defiling our father's own bed. His great destiny was shattered forever. He cursed the shared violence of Simeon and Levi, remembering their bloody massacre at Shechem. For their savage, unholy anger, they would be fractured and scattered among our tribes. Then his eyes locked onto me, Judah. The terror in the room shifted to awe. He declared my brothers would praise me, my enemies would break beneath me, and I would rest like a terrifying, untouchable lion. He prophesied the royal scepter would never leave my bloodline, not until the true king arrives, the one all nations will fiercely obey. I listened, trembling, as he painted a future of staggering wealth, eyes dark with wine and teeth white with milk. Then he turned to Zebulun, promising him a life by the crashing sea, a safe harbor for foreign ships stretching out toward Sidon. He called Issachar a heavy-boned donkey, trading his freedom for a quiet, enslaved life on good land. He warned that Dan would be a judge, but also a venomous snake in the dust, biting the horse's heel to throw its rider. Suddenly, my father gasped for air, breaking the prophecy to scream into the dark, "I wait for your salvation, O Lord." He breathed again. Gad would be brutally attacked by raiders, but would hunt them down in the end. Asher would pull royal feasts from the dirt. Naphtali was a beautiful running doe, speaking elegant words. But when he looked at Joseph, my heart sank under the weight of his love. Joseph was a thriving vine by a desert spring, growing tall despite the archers who hated him. My brother survived because the mighty one held his arms steady, the great shepherd and the immovable stone of our people. He called down the rain of heaven and the hidden waters of the deep. He declared Joseph's wealth would eclipse everything our ancestors knew. This massive glory would crown his head, forever separating him from the rest of his brothers. Finally, he called Benjamin a hungry wolf, ripping flesh at dawn and dividing the bloody spoils at dusk. That was it. I stood in the silent room, realizing he had just locked every single one of us into our eternal destinies, forging the 12 tribes of our spiritual map. With nothing left to say, he gave his last absolute command. He demanded to be carried to the ancient cave of Machpelah, to sleep beside Abraham, Isaac, and my mother Leah. Then, slowly, he pulled his feet up onto the bed. He exhaled one final shuddering breath and slipped away into eternity. I watched Joseph collapse onto our father's chest, sobbing and kissing his lifeless face. Egyptian doctors preserved his body, and this foreign empire wept for 70 long days. Granted royal permission, Joseph marched us all, alongside a massive Egyptian army, back to Canaan. There we buried him in the dark cave of our ancestors. Our grief was so violently loud that the locals named that dirt Abel Mitzrayim, the weeping of Egypt. Back in the shadows of Egypt, my old guilt started screaming. Without father to protect us, I panicked, terrified Joseph would finally exact his bloody revenge. We begged for mercy, throwing our bodies face down in the dirt before him. But he looked at me with strange pity. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "You planned my destruction, but God engineered it for survival." He swore to feed us and protect our children, breaking the cycle of our ancient sins. He stayed in this foreign trap, living to 110, watching his great-grandchildren play in the dust. But as his own death crept closer, he called us near, anchoring us to the forgotten promise God made to our bloodline, that the Creator would rip us out of this Egyptian exile and drag us back to the promised land. He made me swear a terrifying oath to dig up his bones and carry them home when freedom finally arrived. Then he died. We locked his embalmed corpse in an Egyptian coffin, leaving his ghost to wait. This is where our origin story pauses, not in victory, but trapped in a terrifying, hopeful limbo, desperate for our true identity to awaken. I see the terrifying storm approaching. My children will multiply in the shadows, only to be crushed by slavery. But from this deep exile, God will raise a deliverer. His hand will shatter the chains, leading us, and you, out of fear, back to our true home. If my exile through Genesis echoes your own fears of losing your identity, share this journey with friends and family wandering the same desert. Hit the like button to mark our survival. Walk with me next time into Exodus, our desperate, terrifying cry for deliverance. Meet me in the next video.